there's concern. Her children, grandchildren are on their way to be in the company of the Queen. We would expect these arrivals at some point over the next half hour to an hour and possibly into the evening.
And just to say, we're hearing from Downing Street from the Prime Minister's spokesperson that Liz Truss has no plans to travel to Scotland today or tomorrow. James Matthews, thank you.
Well, we are joined now by the royal broadcaster and photographer Helena Chard to react to what is unfolding this afternoon. Helena, just to remind people who may just be tuning in, a spokesperson for the palace today said that following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. The Queen's close family have been informed, many of them arriving in Scotland to be with her. The Duke of Cambridge just landing at Aberdeen Airport a few moments ago. Can you tell me how you reacted when you heard this statement? Because it's being seen as very significant.
Hello?
Helena, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. I'm here, yes.
Yeah, Helen, I'm sorry. I'm afraid we've got a few problems with the line here, but I'll just ask you your reaction to the statement that was released by Buckingham Palace earlier on today.
Thank you. It's so good to join you. To begin with, my thoughts are with Her Majesty the Queen and obviously her family at this time. I think many other people, my colleagues, there's some broadcasters, we're shocked. You know, everyone has heavy hearts. But I think something deep in me is it was a reminder to really to remember the joy and the courage that she's given the nation. And she's given an enormous amount of strength to everyone. And I think what she's given is huge. And that is why it will affect a lot of people, not just here, the Commonwealth, but also internationally, because there's a great love.
We understand that from the Reuters news agency that Prince Andrew, Prince Edward have arrived in Scotland as well. As I said, we've just seen the Duke of Cambridge. We understand the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, who were due to be in London at an award ceremony, have cancelled that to head up to Balmoral. Can you just talk me through the significance of what we're seeing unfold?
It's a huge, I mean, this is huge for everybody at the moment. And I'm speaking with you, which is great, but I have to say I do hear people in the background, which is my foreground at the moment. So apologies if I'm not answering what you've asked me. I mean, this is hugely significant at the moment. Hugely significant. The fact that we have, I do apologise, but there's lots of people talking with me.
Okay. I'm afraid our communication lines just aren't great at the moment, so we'll leave it. What we'll do is we'll try and sort them out and come back to you a little later on this afternoon. Apologies, royal broadcaster and photographer there, Helena Chard. Just to remind you, if you're just joining us, of what you're watching unfold this afternoon, we are keeping a close eye on events at Balmoral today. Royal family members gathering there to see the Queen, who is under medical supervision this afternoon. A statement was released by Buckingham Palace earlier saying, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. The Queen, of course, at Balmoral for her annual summer break. She is on holiday there. We saw her just on Tuesday with the outgoing Prime Minister Boris Johnson and the new Prime Minister Liz Truss. She officially gave Liz Truss an invitation to form a government, and we had that official picture of the Queen with the new Prime Minister. That is the last we have seen of the Queen in public. I'm going to hand over to Dermot Murnaghan now, who has the latest from Buckingham Palace.
OK, Sarah Jane, many thanks for that. Yes, here at Buckingham Palace, the world's press are gathering for any news that emerges about Her Majesty's health. I want to go to our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. He's in the central lobby at the Houses of Parliament. And Sam, of course, on today, politicians should have been digesting that energy support plan unveiled by Liz Truss and her government this afternoon. Of course, that was interrupted. We saw in the House of Commons itself as the news spread, and that now everyone, all the politicians are digesting the situation with the Queen's health.
That's right, Dermot. It was about 20 minutes into Liz Truss's statement to the House of Commons, her first big statement as Prime Minister, the biggest policy she might ever announce, just 48 hours after the Queen made her Prime Minister, that we got some indication that frankly, something was up. Nadine Zahawi, a Cabinet Office Minister, was seen conferring with her in her place at the dispatch box. A few moments later, Keir Starmer was handed a piece of paper by Angela Rayner, his deputy, suggesting that something was up. He then left the chamber, came back wearing a more sombre tie. And it was moments after that that the Speaker of the House of Commons issued a statement alerting MPs to what was going on. He talked about how the whole House's thoughts and prayers were with the royal family. Liz Truss, as you were saying earlier, has sent a message wishing the Queen well. Other party leaders have also sent their wishes. Keir Starmer said, along with the rest of the country, I'm deeply worried by the news from Buckingham Palace this afternoon. My thoughts are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time, and I join everyone across the United Kingdom in hoping for her recovery. Nicola Sturgeon says, all of us are feeling profoundly concerned at the reports of Her Majesty's health. My thoughts and wishes are with the Queen and all of the royal family at this time. And Ed Davey, who's the Liberal Democrat leader, the whole nation's thoughts and prayers are with Her Majesty, the Queen and her family, as we all hope and pray for her full recovery. Liz Truss, now the 15th Prime Minister that Her Majesty the Queen has seen. The first, Winston Churchill, really just 2 days into the job of Prime Minister after going up to Balmoral to see the Queen, to kiss the hands and take on the job at this critical moment for the country, now facing more questions about how she's going to deal with her energy supply, but other issues, I think, on MPs' minds. The mood here in the House of Commons and across the Houses of Parliament is sombre and fretful. We are waiting for more news here, MPs finding out what's going on.
And Sam, just to confirm, we understand the Prime Minister, from her spokesperson, has no plans to travel to Scotland.
That's right. I think Liz Truss at the moment staying put here. She has an incredibly packed political agenda for now. We await further news, at which point things may change, but if that news comes, but we will wait and see what happens. Liz Truss, for now, keeping her plans very much in place. This would have been one of the biggest days of her premiership. Now, of course, other things on MPs' minds as we wait to find out what's going on from Buckingham Palace.
Okay, Sam, thank you very much indeed. Sam Coates, our Deputy Political Correspondent, Deputy Political Editor in the House of Commons there. Let's talk now to Stephen Bates, The Guardian's former royal correspondent. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Bates. Tell us in your reaction to the statement, which is all we've really got to go on, issued just after 12 o'clock today by Buckingham Palace, that doctors are concerned about Her Majesty's health. She's under medical supervision, but she remains comfortable, and added in the facts that senior members of the royal family, her immediate family, her grandchildren and their partners are travelling to Balmoral.
Yes, well, there are two parts to that, aren't there? The first is the concern of the doctors. It sounds very much as if it's more than a mobility issue, which is what they've been saying over recent months. And it's also significant, I think, that the royal family is gathering at Balmoral. They don't normally gather around a bedside under normal circumstances. They stoically get on with their own duties and jobs. So I think there's obviously a deep level of concern about the Queen's health, and it's entirely worrying. And coming at a time of political turmoil, all the more difficult, I suspect, not only for the palace but also for the government.
Yeah, and in just on the health side of the equation, in recent days and weeks, while at Balmoral, we know Her Majesty cancelled an attendance at the Highland Games that she loves so much, and of course yesterday, meeting of the Privy Council.
So yeah, like I said, I'm thinking she passed already, and that's why there's this urgency for
and so maybe that was an early warning
for her family that's right now scattered all over the world, really, to come to her bedside.
Political turmoil, of course.
And
the most recent picture we saw of Her Majesty,
and then shortly thereafter, they'll make the announcement. And also, they have to get things in order. You know, they got to. I mean, they already know what happens next, but they have to put it together.
Yes,
lots of people politically are already going to start to say, "Oh, it's going to be chaos and this and that." And so
she knows all about the Constitution.
Got to get their ducks in a row before they formally announce that she has passed. At least that's my opinion.
Liz Truss being her 15th Prime Minister. Truss born in 1975, her first Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, born in 1874. So 100 years difference, quite a spread. And quite a spread, of course, because of the longevity of her reign.
And what longevity and activity. And it has been said, it's been said for many years now, hasn't it? And especially as Her Majesty went into her 90s, that would she ever consider stepping aside, as we've seen in so many other countries, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, in Spain. We've seen it with popes, that as they age, they step aside, but the Queen took that duty so very seriously.
Yes, it's abdication, I think, has not crossed her mind. They've tried it once, the royal family, and it didn't agree with them. Yes, as she said on her 21st birthday, however long her life was going to be, it was going to be a life of service. And while she could keep going, even into her mid-90s, she was determined to keep on doing it, still going through the red boxes every day, still meeting a range of people, admittedly cutting back on official duties and public appearances, but still out and about, still meeting people, as you can see there, and apparently really enjoying herself up in her favourite place, up in Scotland.
And still, as you say, when we talk about her engagement with the issues of the day, still on Tuesday, we understand having a conversation with Liz Truss about the difficulties that the government and the country is facing.
Well, yes, she knows better than anyone what the political situation is, and she's seen more political crises come and go than most politicians have had hot dinners. And I assume that she didn't rehearse the famous or infamous speech of Liz Truss when she was a Liberal Democrat calling for the end of the monarchy. She certainly changed her mind about that, the Prime Minister.
Well, I'm sure Her Majesty's met a few people like that, particularly when they accepted their honours. Stephen Bates, thank you very much indeed, former royal correspondent with The Guardian.
Oh, well, we continue to watch events at Balmoral. The Queen's former Scottish Communications Secretary joins me now, Louise Tate. Louise, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon here on Sky News. The statement we received from Buckingham Palace earlier on today, concerning, to use a word that was in that statement, but also quite surprising, given we saw the Queen just on Tuesday receiving the new Prime Minister.
Yes, I think that that was something that was very clear that the Queen was very determined to go ahead with, as is characteristic of her. But I think that when the announcement was made about the Privy Council, then that would inevitably raise, people would be concerned that that was not usual for her. And perhaps that's why they felt the need to just clarify the situation regarding the present state of Her Majesty's health.
Louise, you'll know better than anyone as a former communications director for the Queen, just how important words are and just how rare announcements are about the Queen's health. Can you talk us through what you think is the significance of this statement from Buckingham Palace today?
Well, Buckingham Palace have always said that they would never, and it has been proven, never give a running commentary on matters of health. And I think we saw that when the Duke of Edinburgh was unwell. But they necessarily feel that there is a duty of being honest and just about the situation. And I think it is significant because it's not something we're used to seeing from Buckingham Palace. But clearly they felt it was necessary, and probably I think it was the right thing to do, given that we've got these significant family movements, and without clarifying the situation, it would have been led to speculation, especially when family were not appearing at events that they were scheduled to be at in attendance.
Yeah, Buckingham Palace will not give a running commentary, and there is now this void period, isn't there, from the statement going out. We are now keeping an eye on the gates of Balmoral. We know that the Duke of Cambridge is on his way. We saw him land at Aberdeen Airport. We understand that the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are on their way as well. Can you give us an idea of the kind of coordination that will be going into getting all the senior royals in one place to see the Queen this afternoon?
Well, they all have diaries, busy diaries. They've all got commitments. They are, some of them, I'm not sure, but it could have been out of the country, for instance. So that doesn't seem to be the case this time. And it's important that, as you might imagine, for any family member who's ill, that family tries to gather. But there are logistical challenges, and things have to be rearranged and hastily rearranged. But clearly, that's a priority to do that, and they seems to be managed to accomplish that. And it's helpful that the Prince of Wales or the Duke of Rothesay, as known in Scotland, was already at Birk Hall, it would seem. So there are some logistical challenges, but they can easily be overcome. There is the challenge of the weather, as we know. Helicopters are difficult often. So they'll be finding the best and most efficient way to get people where they need to be around Her Majesty at Balmoral.
We are, of course, talking about the Queen, but we're also talking about a mother and a grandmother, and they are the royal family, but they are a family. So looking at what is happening, people fear the worst but hope for the best. When a loved one is ill, particularly an elderly relative, you will want to be with that relative. The royal family in that regard, no different to any other.
No different to any other, I would say. It's entirely reasonable that these are, given the message of concern, that you would want to be with your loved one at this time, and that's clearly what they've cleared the diaries and made possible this afternoon.
Nobody wants to overreact and nobody wants to speculate. So let's just talk about Balmoral and why the Queen is there. She goes there every summer. Can you talk to us about the significance of Balmoral to the Queen?
You broke up a little bit there, but I think you're asking about how important Balmoral is to Her Majesty. I think it's important to many members of the royal family. The Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall, or the Duke and Duchess of Rothesay, as he should be known in Scotland, they spend a lot of time at Birk Hall. Someone once said to me that they consider it their marital home. So it is somewhere that is dear to the heart of Her Majesty. We heard James Matthews talking just before there about it's one of our favourite places.
So hey, good morning, everybody.
It is such a beautiful, beautiful place, and it changes with the seasons. No 2 days are ever the same.
I personally believe that she's already passed away.
It's a lovely family.
I think I don't think there would be such an urgent call for for the whole family to come and fly in to where she is.
Myself, I've seen just how relaxed members of the family are when they're
and with that in mind,
I think somebody in the comments said it was Kate.
Is there because
a lot of what is called that death?
That she would travel to Buckingham Palace to.
I forgot the term for it. They started making bets, whether she's dead or not.
At Balmoral for what
and I mean, it's stupid, right? So they're trying to avoid that.
Take the palace at its word, but
I think people are going to do it anyway.
What may have been going
anyway,
on
I think once the family has gathered,
will not give a running
after a little while, you're going to hear, "Oh, she passed away, surrounded by her family."
Perhaps things may have been going on.
So I think I think she's already. I think she's gone. They're just preserving her
thing to
and
assume?
the family politically in the situation getting their ducks in a row. That's what I think.
Continuity of monarchy and government are two things that are clearly very important to this country, and both Her Majesty and the Prime Minister, both Prime Ministers, fulfilled their constitutional roles. To me, the place was not as important as the people and the offices. You could, perhaps there were some indications that that her health was not quite as robust as we might have thought. But it is speculation. Somebody was going to have to move one way or the other. Somebody was either going to have to come to London, or London was going to have to come to Balmoral. And I think it was common sense to me, really. It was.
And of course, she is the Queen. If you're invited up to Balmoral, I cannot imagine an outgoing Prime Minister or an incoming one refusing that invitation from the Queen. Just a final question while I have you, if I may, Louise Tate, former Scottish Communications Secretary for the Queen. In the statement released by Buckingham Palace earlier today, it says the Queen remains comfortable at Balmoral and is under medical supervision. With regard to the Queen's health, does she have the same medical team that will travel with her around the country, or does she have a specific team in Scotland and another one in London? I'm just trying to get an idea of what level of care is at the Queen's disposal.
Well, as you might imagine, there is a medical household. I don't think that's giving away any secrets. And there are people locally that applies to Sandringham, London, Windsor, Edinburgh, Holyrood, and in Aberdeenshire. So there will be a team of people who she's familiar with, and that's perfectly normal. That's perfectly usual, and that is not a new thing at all.
Louise Tate, we really appreciate your time this afternoon reacting to the news that the Queen is under medical supervision at Balmoral. As you've reiterated, it's important not to speculate and overreact. But as someone who knew the Queen well, we really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah Jane. Well, as Sarah Jane was saying, that statement released by Buckingham Palace at about 12:30 today grabbed not just the attention of everyone here in the United Kingdom. We saw what happened in the House of Commons while Liz Truss was making a statement. The new Prime Minister was making a statement about supporting people through the energy crisis. You could see the reaction on politicians' faces, but there's been international reaction as well. The eyes of the world now are on Balmoral and, of course, Buckingham Palace. Dominic Waghorn, diplomatic editor, is here with me now. And as I say, as we just even look around us here, Dominic, the attention of the world is now focused on Buckingham Palace, on Balmoral, waiting for news.
Yeah, not just British news crews, but a lot of foreign media here as well, Italians and others waiting here. One Italian journalist asking me for advice about where she should go in the British Isles during this this extraordinary day, and a lot of tourists, of course, gathering amongst British people, waiting outside the palace for news. I was just at the Italian embassy, where the outgoing Italian ambassador Raffaele Trombetta was giving a lunch to diplomatic correspondents as he leaves the country at the end of his term in office. And he gave a toast to the health of the Queen. And he admitted this is unusual for a foreign diplomat to do so. Obviously, British diplomats do that all the time, but for a foreign diplomat, an ambassador, to do so, I think reflects his concern and the concern of many others who'll be watching this, because, of course, the Queen, deeply loved, revered around the world by not just British people, not just in the Commonwealth, but particularly, I think, by diplomats and world leaders and politicians who she has advised and been wise counsel to over the years. She's met or spent time with 13 out of 14 of the presidents in her 96 years on this planet, and a lot of them have said how useful she's been, the advice she has given them. And I think they will all be watching closely, as we all are, to hear what news may come later today and a further update on the Queen's health. And we've been used, obviously, to concerns about her health. We've been used to her cancelling her attendance at events. Obviously, back in June, she was on the balcony over there for the first day of her Platinum Jubilee weekend celebrations. And the next day, obviously, then had to cancel her attendance, or felt she, I think, under medical advice, felt she wasn't up to going to St Paul's Cathedral to attend the Thanksgiving, the Jubilee Thanksgiving service. So we've been used to these sort of periodic bouts of concern, but I think we're on a different level, I think, with this, where the fact that her doctors are concerned is what is causing concern amongst so many of us.
And Dominic, you talk of the international admiration for Her Majesty because of her knowledge, her longevity, the advice you mentioned that she's given so many world leaders. She's seen them come and go. She's seen heads of state come and go, particularly when we mention countries like Italy. And that admiration international is about the role, isn't it, as well, about the symbolism, the steadiness, the stability that she offered to the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I mean, constitutionally, she is that source of stability and continuity for the British because she is an unelected head of state. We have the advantage constitutionally of having just one head of state who has the job for life, and therefore the dirty work of politics is left to the politicians in a smaller house down the road in Downing Street. And that's been the way for centuries now. And I think other countries have looked at that with some envy. And others obviously feel that they have a better way of running things. But the great strength to the British Constitution is that you have this head of state who's above the fray, above the political fray, if she's able to remain so. And obviously the Queen has been expert at doing that for decades. And so that's given her a sense of being a source of strength and stability and continuity. But that's also given her an extraordinarily long period of time in which she's been able to observe politicians here, but also then use that experience to advise politicians elsewhere. So many American politicians, presidents have said that her advice has been invaluable. Her wisdom drawn from those decades of watching politicians closely, advising them in her weekly audiences with prime ministers and the rest of it. That's given her something that is invaluable to presidents that come and go. Those years of wisdom have made her invaluable in terms of the advice she's been able to give them.
I suppose the other main international role she's been playing is, of course, as head of the Commonwealth. And she is the monarch who oversaw the transition from empire to Commonwealth.
She did. And in 1947 in South Africa, I don't think many viewers will remember this, it's going back a long way, but she gave this speech on her 21st birthday when she was in South Africa. She'd been there part of a 3-month tour with her parents. And on the occasion of her 21st birthday, it was decided she should give a speech, an address to the entire empire. And in that speech, she talked about how her life would be devoted to the service and the duty of service to the entire great imperial family, as she put it, to which we all belong. That imperial family then, as you say, became a Commonwealth. But that commitment to the imperial family, to those millions of people around the world, I think underlined that even at the age of 21, she saw her job that she didn't know was going to be hers, but she saw her role as princess as not just to her subjects or the subjects of her father at the time on the British Isles, but to subjects across the British Empire as it was then and their Commonwealth now. And she has kept true to that pledge throughout her reign. And that's what has made her such a globe-trotting global celebrity. You know, she invented the idea of a sort of global figure going out and bringing all the pomp and bling and the majesty of her office to so many people. And we have to remember, you know, she was the first to do that. We've seen popes do it, we've seen presidents do it since, we've seen Hollywood superstars do it, but she invented that kind of idea of traveling the world and globe-trotting. And for that, I think she has been hugely celebrated.
And it's hard to believe, isn't it, when you talk about the number of presidents, the number of prime ministers that she's given advice to and learnt from. When we go back to the start of her reign, she was dealing with the titans, with someone in her 20s. She was dealing with, Eisenhower and Winston Churchill.
Yeah. She's met all the American presidents, apart from Lyndon B. Johnson. So all of them, going back to Eisenhower. As you say, and Winston Churchill took her under his wing and was kind of a mentor to her and saw that's a huge part of his job to look after this young princess and bring her through and advise her on affairs of state. She was so young when she became queen, and before that as well as princess. And yeah, she was able to observe and learn from these great global figures, these as you say, titans of global politics. And that gave her, I think, huge counsel and wisdom to draw on in the years to come. And that's why she's so revered globally, because of that, and also because she's been queen for so long. She's been this extraordinary figure of stability and continuity. And that's why we're all looking on so intently and with such concern. And also why it's a very difficult job for the palace courtiers and the doctors to keep us informed and to not create a kind of void of information, but tell us enough so that we're not overly concerned. Tell us what's going on accurately. So I think we have to sort of bear that in mind. It's a tough day for them as they work out what's going to happen next.
Dominic, thanks very much.
I just want to bring you a bit of breaking news. We understand that senior royals are either at Balmoral with the Queen or heading there. The Duke of Sussex is, we understand, heading to Balmoral, but sources are telling Sky News he is making this trip by himself. The Duchess of Sussex is not travelling to Balmoral to see the Queen. Sky News sources telling us that Prince Harry is making the trip alone. It's understood Meghan will remain in London, but will not be attending the Well Child Awards. These are awards supporting the Well Child charity that the Duke of Sussex is a patron of. They are due to take place in London tonight, but neither the Duke or Duchess will be in attendance. The Duchess, we understand, could potentially join Prince Harry in Scotland at a later date following this change of plan. But as it stands at the moment, the Duke of Sussex is travelling to Balmoral alone to see the Queen. We saw his brother, the Duke of Cambridge, arrive at Aberdeen Airport a little while ago. He is in a car heading to the gates that you see on your screen right now. We will keep across the arrivals of the senior members of the royal family as they happen here on Sky News, all of them gathering around the Queen as her doctors say they are concerned about her health. Well, joining me now is the historian and author, Sir Anthony Seldon. Sir Anthony, I just want to get a sense of how you're feeling about the news we're watching unfold this afternoon, the significance of it, the weight of it.
Well, I think, like most people in the country, a sense of anxiety, a sense of not knowing what are we to make of it. How ill is she? What could have happened? She looked in good form when she was with Liz Truss, the incoming Prime Minister. So a sense of bewilderment, but also a sense of impending anxiety and foreboding. If it doesn't happen now, she is 96. She can't live forever. And it will be the most profound moment in my living memory. She's been my queen all my life, and that will be true of the great majority of people in the country. She's such a presence that we almost overlook her. 15 prime ministers have come and gone, but there's only been one monarch. She's always there. She's there at the moments, like most recently COVID, when the country is deeply perturbed.
Good morning, everyone.
To find the words, harking back to the Second World War.
See, it's raining over there. That's outside of Balmoral.
She is the
castle
in chief of the nation, but she's also the binder in chief of the nation. She is the person who holds the different nations of the United Kingdom together and all parts of the country. And she, of course, talks to us beyond political parties. She has, as we've just been hearing, no political affiliation at all, and therefore she's able to speak to people who are of all different political persuasions and none, because she can truly speak for every person in the entire country, whatever age, whatever background, whatever social, economic class. She is there for all of us, and we will miss her deeply on a personal and a national level when she goes. It will also change Britain's standing in the world.
So many people will be tuning into Sky News, watching and waiting. I think you described it perfectly there, with a sense of anxiety, because as you said, the Queen has always been there for the majority of the country. 70 years of service, she has always been there. So it feels like if anything were to happen to the Queen, it would be a real shift in this country at a time when the country is struggling in such uncertain times. I think this is why people are feeling it so keenly today, Sir Anthony Seldon, and really just watching Balmoral for further news.
Yes, I think that is right. I mean, there was never going to be an ideal moment for her to be seriously ill, if indeed she is, as appears to be the case, in a worrying condition, there's always trouble in the nation in one corner or another. But this is obviously with the cost of living, the fuel, inflation, NHS, the war in Ukraine and more, and the prospect of COVID coming back with a new variant. She is a comfort. She's the nation's granny. She's somebody who we all have at the back of our minds, who is a constant. She goes on and come rain and sunshine, night and day, autumn and summer. She's always there. And in a sense, we've taken it so much for granted. And if and when she is plucked away, it will be emotionally and psychologically very significant for all the people in the nation who care for her. And that is, as polls would show, vast numbers. So on every level, personal, psychological, as well as political and diplomatic, international, this will be one of the great moments. Whatever else happens in the 21st century, this will be one of the defining moments of the 21st century.
Sir Anthony Selden, thank you so much for speaking to us here on Sky News. I know you're going to stay with us for a little while longer as we watch those gates of Balmoral. As I said, the Duke of Cambridge has landed at Aberdeen Airport. We understand that he is in a car on his way to Balmoral. We also know, we've learned in the last few minutes, that the Duke of Sussex is travelling to Balmoral alone. The Duchess of Sussex, as we understand at this present time, is not making the journey to see the Queen. That may change, but sources telling us at the moment the Duke of Sussex is on his way alone.
Thanks, Sarah Jane. Well, let's find out if there's anything to be gleaned from the politicians. Live to Downing Street, our political correspondent Joe Pike is there. And Joe, what is the latest from there?
Well, Dermot, Liz Truss's official spokesman, has confirmed she will not be making the trip up to Balmoral. I think it would be a surprise if she did so. Certainly, though, there has been a sense here in number 10 in Whitehall in Westminster over the last year or so, that although the central constitutional role that the Queen plays as head of state has not changed and will not change, the way she has carried it out, the way she's undertaken that role certainly has. We saw that at the state opening of Parliament early this year in May, where the Queen's speech was actually delivered by her son, the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, with the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William alongside. And we also, far more importantly perhaps, this week saw that changeover of Prime Minister, Boris Johnson tendering his resignation, Liz Truss accepting an invitation to form a government not a mile away from here where you are, Dermot, at Buckingham Palace, but both incoming and outgoing Prime Minister making that 500-mile trip to Royal Deeside, to Aberdeenshire, this private, secluded castle home of monarchs back to the time of Queen Victoria, where the Queen and her family are now gathering. And also last night, I think significantly, a Privy Council meeting which was due to take place virtually, the Privy Council being a group of senior government advisors. That meeting wasn't cancelled but postponed because the doctors, we were told by Buckingham Palace, had advised her to rest. That would have been the moment Liz Truss would have taken an oath to be the First Lord of the Treasury, a title she has alongside Prime Minister, and the words First Lord of the Treasury are the only words on the door of number 10. Now, there's not some huge constitutional problem with that being delayed, but I think it was a sign. I think it's also important to reflect that the Queen has and continues to provide wisdom and counsel to prime ministers, and does that so well partly because of her longevity, because she has provided continuity. It is astounding that she has been talking to, knowing, having audiences with prime ministers right back to Winston Churchill, people like Churchill, Eden, Macmillan, who are now figures in the history books, who historians debate over the decisions of, who school children, university students learn about. Those were people that the Queen advised at very challenging times, times of crisis, times of change, it is so significant that she has provided that role over 7 decades, and in the 10 decades, of course, in her life. And I think what is so important in the role politicians, certainly here in Westminster, are feeling about what she does is she provides this very familiar face that we all know, and yet she remains an enigmatic figure too.
Joe Pike in Downing Street, many thanks.
Just want to bring you reaction to today's news. Obviously, we've had that statement from Buckingham Palace. We've just had this from the DUP leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, who said there would be an outpouring of emotion across Northern Ireland at the news that the Queen is under medical supervision at Balmoral. Speaking in Belfast, Sir Geoffrey said, "We are all watching with increasing alarm and concern about the news that is breaking. Our thoughts and prayers are with Her Majesty the Queen and the royal family as they gather at Balmoral." I know across Northern Ireland there will be an outpouring of emotion right now. While we continue to wait for news from Balmoral, we've had nothing from Buckingham Palace since that statement earlier on today. Let's bring in the former editor of OK Magazine and royal commentator Martin Townsend. I beg your pardon. Martin, your reaction to the news earlier on today that the Queen, there is concern about her health.
Yeah, I mean, she is sort of 96, and there are going to be concerns about her health, but it feels like quite a significant moment with the family. Obviously, close members of the family flying up to Balmoral to be with her, and it feels like I think we're all sort of hoping and praying, hoping for the best, really, and but it feels like a very significant moment, doesn't it?
It does. We don't want to speculate, we don't want to overreact, but the fact that Buckingham Palace felt the need to put out this statement today when we'd seen the Queen just on Tuesday, that last time we saw her publicly, the official photograph of her inviting the new Prime Minister Liz Truss to form a government, the fact that just a couple of days later they felt the need to put this statement out saying that they were concerned, that is significant, that carries weight.
Yeah, it certainly does carry weight. As I say, I think we can't really speculate at this stage. I mean, the Queen is a remarkable woman. She's a remarkably strong woman, but obviously she is, advancing in years, and so at times like this, the whole nation is concerned. I mean, there's an atmosphere around, of people just hoping that that it will be good news rather than the opposite, and but it feels like a significant moment, and I think we've known the Queen all of our lives, and she feels like someone we all know. We've all grown up with her over the decade. She's always been there for us. She's like the guiding light of the nation, and so there's a kind of collective at the moment holding of breath, I think, across the nation, and we can't speculate, and we would just hope that that it's perhaps better than we thought. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a time for people to reflect and send their well wishes. As you said, nobody wants to speculate or assume the worst, but people very much, as you said, watching and waiting with bated breath. I was speaking to the historian St Anthony Selden earlier on, who said she's the nation's granny. As you said, Martin, she has always been there. And I just wonder how the public have seen the Queen in recent years in terms of, we've just had those phenomenal Jubilee celebrations where if the monarch's popularity was in any doubt, you just had to watch that weekend of celebration and goodwill from the nation unfold.
Yes, goodwill from the nation and goodwill from the entire world, really. I mean, they were extraordinary events, absolutely amazing. They demonstrated that the monarchy is as healthy and strong as ever. And the most amazing display of pageantry, and something that we could all unite around and be proud of. And the most extraordinary summer. And exactly as you would expect from a woman who has just done everything with such style, everything with such amazing dignity, You know, we knew that it would be great, but it was even greater than we expected it to be. And you know, all of those things, all of those memories are going through people's minds of the summer. And as I say, you know, as we wait for, you know, whatever news, you know, hopefully good news, but we just don't know. You know, we'll all be individually and collectively reflecting on the Queen and how much she means to us all. And she is like the nation's grandmother without any shadow of a doubt. We all feel we know her. I mean, isn't that extraordinary from somebody, you know, the head of the nation, that we all actually feel a connection to her, a really strong emotional connection to her. And I think that's fantastic sort of testimony to her, you know, the way in which she's conducted herself and the way in which she's worked for us all over the years.
The Queen, a dedicated servant of her people, as I said on Tuesday, carrying out official duties. We understand that she has been receiving state papers every day at Balmoral on her holiday, as she does day in, day out, some 2 to 3 hours of reading of state papers she does a day, which is perhaps why it took people by surprise, this statement this morning. As I said, we saw her fulfilling official duties on Tuesday, but the Queen, from what we know, is a pragmatist. For a number of years now, she has been shaping the future of the monarchy. She has been whittling down the senior royals to a tight group that will continue her legacy.
Yes, I mean, I think she has prepared the monarchy so brilliantly for the future. I mean, to my mind, I mean, obviously there are challenges, you know, to the monarchy from the outside, some from the inside, and you know, we've seen the sort of slight buffeting of the monarchy over the years, actually, not just in recent times, but throughout it all, the Queen has led so steadfastly, and she has strengthened the monarchy. Is an argument for saying, I know that people sometimes say, oh, well, the monarchy's, you know, having a rotten time or whatever, but my argument would be it's never been stronger, actually, and much of that is due to her steadfastness, to her refusal really to sort of to change her path, to just carry on doing what she does. And what you were saying earlier about the fact of her keeping on top of her papers, and you know, she is the most avid reader of newspapers. As an ex-newspaper man, I'm so delighted she set such a great example. And you know, she wants to know what's going on in the world. She's always been like that, and it's no surprise that she's been like that this week as well. And across her communications, she is an amazing, remarkable woman. Absolutely amazing.
Martin Townsend, former editor of OK Magazine and royal commentator, really good to speak to you this afternoon. Thank you for your time.
Sarah Jane, thank you. Well, joining me now is Simon Morgan, who served as a Royal Protection Officer to Her Majesty the Queen and other senior members of the royal family from 2006 to 2013. Thanks for joining us, Simon Morgan. And Simon, well, we know that the Queen's doctors, her medical staff are concerned. We're all concerned.
It's certainly an unprecedented move with regards to announcing what the doctors said today, and then seeing senior members of the royal family move from where they are actually up to the Balmoral estate. You know, that is something that we haven't seen before, so we naturally have to look at what is actually going on here.
And the Balmoral estate, we know that you know it well, the Queen knows it well. She loves it. She's been going there all her life.
All right, so I'm going to be posting in a minute a few things of what happens when the Queen passes away. So I'll be posting that in just a minute here in the comments, all right?
She felt very much at home there and could very much do kind of what she wanted to do away from the prying eyes kind of the public. So it's very much a favourite palace of hers, and certainly the Prince of Wales also stays down the road in Burke Hall. So yes, it is very, very popular. And certainly now to see other senior members of the family will actually put the spotlight onto the Balmoral estate.
Simon, tell me a little bit of your experience working with Her Majesty. What is she like to work for?
She's great to work for. As a boss, you couldn't wish for someone better. Fully understands your role as a protection officer, knows why you're there, and whilst you're trying to work in and around her, she's actually working in and around you. to make your life easier, which as a principal is sometimes unheard of. So, a fantastic person to work with, but, understands why you're there, and that is really key for us.
Can you give me an example? Tell me how she worked around you. That sounds quite extraordinary.
When you're in certainly a royal walkabout, you'll be very much watching the crowd, looking for what you expect to see and what you don't expect to see. And if you're standing at a certain point because you're uncomfortable with something, the Queen would actually kind of walk around you, knowing that you're not comfortable with that, rather than trying to walk in front of you. So she very much reads the situation, but has had protection all her life, so she understands how it works, and that's very important to us.
And that's interesting what you say, because she also understands her connection with the British people, and not just with the British people, with so many millions internationally. That must have given you the jitters every now and again, I suspect.
Certainly a royal walkabout is the most challenging aspect of your job as a protection officer. You're putting a senior member of the royal family, in this case the Queen, right in front of the public domain, and you've very much got to be on your game for that particular 10, 15, 20 minutes, however long it lasts. But the royal family fully understand that they have to and want to go and meet members of the public, understand what their lives are like, what their needs are, and just generally talk to them. I mean, thankfully in my time we didn't have the selfie phenomenon, which my colleagues now have to deal with, but nonetheless people wanted face time with the Queen, and they wanted to talk to her, and she would listen and talk back, and you as a protection officer have to manage that.
But Simon, you did get to witness that legendary wit, I imagine, up close and personal.
Yeah, very much so. Like I said, a great person to work for, a great understanding, and a very much a high level of wit. One time, whilst up on the Balmoral estate, the Queen came around and said, are you going to follow me this time? As if we wouldn't. We were ready to go, and she was just kind of edging the bets as to who was going to go first. But yeah, a tremendous understanding of people.
And I'm sure you'll join us, the entire nation, and so many millions of people around the world, in wishing her all the best. Simon Morgan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're watching Sky News. It is just after 5 o'clock. If you are just joining us, we are monitoring the health of the Queen. We are keeping an eye there on the gate at Balmoral. A statement released by Buckingham Palace earlier on today saying that her medical team are concerned about her health. She is comfortable, and senior royals, her children and grandchildren, are gathering at Balmoral to be with her. It is just after 12 o'clock in Washington. We've just had this from the White House. President Biden has been briefed on the health of the Queen. He has been briefed on the health of the Queen, and a statement from President Biden says that his thoughts are with the Queen and her family at this time. So that's the President of the United States briefed on the health of the Queen and sending his thoughts to the monarch and her family. Well, it has been confirmed today by Buckingham Palace that the Queen is under medical supervision. Behind the gates you see there at Balmoral in Scotland, her doctors became concerned about her health, and Buckingham Palace decided to release a statement around lunchtime today. All of the Queen's children are now thought to be at her side in Balmoral or on their way there. This is the statement following further evaluation this morning. The Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. Well, Prince Charles was pictured earlier today leaving Dumfries House in Ayrshire to travel to Aberdeenshire. The Queen's grandchildren are also gathering. A little later, a plane landed at Aberdeen Airport. This was carrying other members of the royal family, including Prince William and Prince Andrew, we understand. We have also learnt this afternoon that Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, is on his way to Balmoral. We understand that he is travelling alone, like his brother Prince William. He is not travelling with his wife, the Duchess of Cambridge, remaining in Windsor, and the Duchess of Sussex, we understand, remaining in London. We have heard from a number of world leaders today and senior political figures. The whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. That is from Liz Truss. If we can just go back to that live shot of Balmoral, cars arriving there. We did see the Duke of Cambridge arrive at Aberdeen Airport a little earlier on, getting into a car to head to Balmoral, but cars arriving there, unsure at this point who is in them. Our correspondent James Matthews is there, so we'll try to find out a little more. But let's just return to some of the tributes that are being paid to the Queen and the well wishes being sent to Scotland as we continue to monitor the monarch's health. The Archbishop of Canterbury took to social media earlier saying, "My prayers and the prayers of the people across the Church of England and the nation are with Her Majesty the Queen today. May God's presence strengthen and comfort Her Majesty, her family, and those who are caring for her at Balmoral." Well, those cars that you just caught a glimpse of going in the gates at Balmoral, we understand were carrying members of the royal family, senior members of the royal family. Prince Edward, we understand, was in that car. Let's bring in James Matthews, who's there at Balmoral for a little more. James, it's all very fluid at the moment. We know that some senior royals are at Balmoral already, a number still arriving. So, it's very much in flux at the moment. But what do you know about what's happening?
Thanks, mate. Prince Edward was in at least one of those vehicles that we've just seen, a convoy of 4 in total. It's unclear at this stage if it was somebody else. It's unclear, but clearly there will be arrivals over the course of the next few hours into the evening. Edward certainly in one of those vehicles. The Duke of Cambridge we saw arriving at Edinburgh Airport, so if he wasn't in that particular convoy of 4, he won't be far away. Prince Charles was already on the estate, of course. He has been there. He's actually been there in recent weeks. Today, he has spent several hours behind the gates of the Balmoral estate. He's been in the company of his mother on and off over the past few weeks. You'll remember that on Saturday, he took her place at the Braemar gathering. And on Saturday itself, I know that before that outing in the late afternoon, he had been in the company of his mother for several hours. His mother, of course, who was in good form in recent days and has been in recent weeks in a part of the world where she feels very comfortable. It is, she enjoys privacy. She enjoys the opportunity to be herself with her family away from the public gaze. And that is a large part of the attraction for her here at Balmoral. People close to the royal family talk about her being comfortable, having picnics, enjoying barbecues with the family, doing the washing up and so on. It's a secluded part of Aberdeenshire where she enjoys privacy, and at this time in particular, perhaps something that's the family around her will value. So we've seen arrivals. Prince Charles was already inside Balmoral. Edward is here. Indeed, Prince Charles, the presence of Prince Charles at Balmoral was the first indicator today that things weren't quite right. He was due to attend an occasion in Lanarkshire. It was a royal visit. That was cancelled. And that was the first indication that perhaps there was something rather more pressing for him and his time closer to his home in Balmoral. So there will be arrivals by car. Aberdeen Airport, the route between Aberdeen Airport and Balmoral, A93, is a well-worn path for the Royals, particularly at this time of year. So we're expecting to see more. Harry will be among them as the evening progresses, and we'll see more arrivals here. But in that convoy of 4, the family has begun to gather. Edward was in that convoy, possibly others will confirm in due course.
James, for the moment, thank you.
Well, here outside Buckingham Palace, the world's press are gathering, and many tourists and visitors standing outside the gates of Buckingham Palace, awaiting news. Let's speak to our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills. And Rhiannon, at the moment, we have simply that statement concerning the Queen's health and the knowledge that so many members of the royal family are gathering at Balmoral.
And yes, interesting, Dermot, there that you should talk about the crowds gathering outside of Buckingham Palace. Of course, at any time of year, you're going to have a crowd there. Tourists always flock there when they come to London. But I think it is a reminder that for many, this news will come as a great concern, not least because
Hey, just remember, I did post in the comments typical things that will happen like right away once she has passed. But just remember, she hasn't officially passed yet. So these are just some things to look out for that will probably.
Doctors were so concerned about
I'm not sure of the exact order of it.
That she should stay
but those are typical things that are going to happen
immediately. I think for those
when
of
she
us
does
who
pass
follow
away.
the royal family closely, it did set alarm bells and it did raise concern. The palace also saying that at the moment she remains comfortable and she is at Balmoral. There were some suggestions that potentially she'd had a fall, but they were quick to kind of shut down that speculation. But also very quickly, they told us that the family had been told that she was deemed to need this medical supervision and also that they were heading to Balmoral, which again, of course, only elevates those concerns for the Queen's health. In some ways, though, I think what is quite a shock in terms of hearing this news is the fact that it was only, on Tuesday that we saw the Queen front and centre once again carrying out one of her key constitutional roles. And certainly in the last few weeks, it was being made very clear that the Queen was determined that she would still be the one who would be there to say farewell to Boris Johnson, her 14th Prime Minister, as he tendered his resignation, and then subsequently welcome her 15th Prime Minister, Liz Truss. Of course, it was decided, as has sometimes been the case, that plans and logistics would have to be changed because the Queen, or doctors decided ultimately that the Queen wasn't able to make that journey down to London, that simply it would be foolish for her to do that. And so they wanted to make sure that a plan was in place to make sure that the Queen knew what she was doing and also her outgoing and incoming Prime Minister. But it did mean that we have got those photographs, very recent photographs of the Queen beaming from ear to ear as she met Liz Truss and began what is a very important relationship, of course, for any new Prime Minister. I think also for both the outgoing Prime Minister and palace officials, and no doubt the Queen herself, it was important that we saw her that day. We haven't actually seen the Queen carrying out any public official duties since July, when she visited a hospice with Princess Anne. And on that occasion, as we have seen quite frequently over the last 12 months, she did have that walking stick with her, a reminder that there have been those mobility issues certainly increasing over the last 12 months. But in essence, I think the palace and Number 10 are very conscious that for some people at the moment now feels like an unsettling time for this country. When you think about economic pressures, pressures on families, and also some might say political uncertainty. We have literally only just got a new Prime Minister. So to see the Queen there carrying out that constitutional role, even at the age of 96, I think for some across this country, yes, not everyone agrees with a hereditary monarchy, but for some up and down the country, she is still this symbol of stability and continuity. And that's exactly what we again saw her on Tuesday, continuing her duties as we've seen her carry out throughout her 70-year reign.
And Rhiannon, in terms of the senior royals, the members of the family that are either at Balmoral or travelling there, so we understand her 4 children, Charles and Andrew and Edward, are there or on their way there, and their partners, and also Prince William and Harry. But do we know, we understand that Meghan will not be travelling with Harry. What about the Duchess of Cambridge?
Yeah, so we were also told that the Duchess of Cambridge also isn't.
So Meghan Markle Meghan
There
is
for sure
not traveling with
was
him.
starting early. So we've seen those pictures of them
Is that
going for a
significant or
second
what?
afternoon yesterday at Ladbroke.
I
So
mean,
I think the
significant
decision
for
was
the
made that
gossip
she will
circles,
be
right?
making that journey up, and
That's what I'm
who
thinking.
knows? But
I'm
subsequently,
not a
that may
fan of
have
hers.
impacted the decision as to whether or not
Never
Meghan
have been.
decided to
She
fly up
seems
there.
very
I think it's hugely significant that the family are gathering there
what's the right
increasingly
word?
over the last 12 months.
Arrogant.
I think very publicly we've seen just how
She's
much
just really
affection
somebody that's
they have for the Queen as a
I
great
don't know. It's
grandmother,
just the way she is.
and a mother.
And I think
and that was abundantly clear throughout the
I
Platinum
think she
Jubilee
took
weekend,
over that whole.
where
She wears
for
the
the first
pants
time
in
we saw
that
the
marriage,
Cambridge children really out for
and
any
I think that's
kind of
what
prolonged period of time.
pissed people off.
There are those wonderful pictures, aren't there,
That he didn't
of
have the
Queen
balls
on the
to
balcony at Buckingham
say
Palace.
no. You can't be like
Talking to
that. This
Prince
is
Louis, who had his
this is
hands
not
over
the
his ears
typical
as there was that
family.
fly past. The Queen, of
You
course,
know,
more
this is a
used to
royal
see
family.
many
Said
fly
you will
pasts,
not behave that
during
way.
her
Or
reign. Many people talk
and too
about
bad he
how
didn't
lucky
notice
she
that
is,
crap
probably one of the most
before
experienced people when it
before
comes
they
to
actually got married.
watching military pageantry.
Or he did,
But
and he
yes,
was
such
just
a lovely
defiant.
image on
But that's a
the Platinum Jubilee of
whole
her
other gossip
reassuring Louis
conversation,
in a way about what was
which I'm not
happening.
a fan of.
We've so often seen that, and I think it's been interesting over the last few years to see more softer images of the Queen at times. Certainly around her 96th birthday, a photograph was released of her sitting in front of a window at Windsor Castle, and for her 96th birthday and then for her Platinum Jubilee, I think the messaging was,
Yeah, I mean, I get
yes,
that.
this is
I know
a
the Queen didn't
remarkable
like
head of
her. A lot of
state,
people don't
but
like her.
frankly, most of us can't remember a
But I
time when
think
she wasn't Queen.
it would have been
But
good for
also,
her
this is a
to
woman who
defy,
has, throughout her life, been
you
balancing
know,
those
defy
challenges
all that
of
talk
carrying
and
out
all
her
those sentiments and
constitutional
just
duties,
go out of
getting on with the
respect.
job in hand,
Because
but
we're talking about
also
the
making sure that she was there
Queen.
to
You
support
know,
her
it's like.
family. And look, there have been difficulties, of course, with the family.
So
Certainly
I
in
think it would have
recent
been a good move
years.
for her to go. I
And
don't see
of
what
course,
could have
back in
been
the
so
1990s,
important
it was a very difficult
that she
time.
did not travel
But
with.
yeah,
I
today
think
the
that's going to
family
cause a whole other storm
will
of
be coming together there at Balmoral.
speculation.
Where,
Like,
don't forget, they all
let's
have
have
really
this
fond
whole
memories of spending
other
time with the Queen
3
in
days of
Scotland.
why
It's a
didn't Meghan
very
Markle
important
travel?
place for all
You
of
know,
them, where they get to kick back in the seclusion
but
of the wildness
I
of
don't
the
know.
Highlands, and
I think she's a
spend
bruja
time
anyway, so
together away from the
it's
prying
probably good that
eyes
she
of
didn't
the
go.
cameras, and enjoy that countryside life. We've seen that in so many home videos of the royal family and photographs. So yeah, I think it's obviously a place that they're very familiar with, and obviously all of them wanting to make what is quite a long journey up to Aberdeenshire to be with the Queen at this moment.
Rhiannon, many thanks. Rhiannon Mills, our royal correspondent there. Well, joining me now is Dr. Anna Hemming, who spent 7 years as a resident in-house doctor at Buckingham Palace, looking after the royal family and the royal household. Very good to talk to you, Dr. Hemming. Well, that statement released by the Queen's medical staff, it says it in the statement, doctors are concerned. She is under medical supervision, but remains comfortable. Just dissect that for us and the decision to release that information.
Well, certainly we didn't release information lightly, and I think we just have to remember that the Queen is a remarkable woman and has been with us for a very long time. So we just have to hope that she's very comfortable and that she is with her family, and they can help her if she can recover. They can help her with that.
Yeah, and that is a calculation, isn't it? Medical confidentiality, privacy, but of course she is.
Hey, Liana, thank you for the super sticker.
People are worried for
Much
her,
appreciated.
but
Thank you so
the other
much.
side of the coin is, of course, you don't want
Glad
to
you could be here.
have an intrusive running commentary.
No, and I think that, for her and for her family and for everybody who goes through this process, there are obviously friends and family that are concerned, and when you're a public profile with such a huge profile, that the nation and most of the world will be concerned. But at the centre of this is somebody who's
Yeah, I didn't know
unwell,
Kate was not traveling either.
The people around them that they.
I don't know, but I think Kate,
So
there's a reason for
that
that, and
family is
I
going to
trust
be
and
with her
believe
now,
that
and whatever she's
1,000%
going
more than I do
through
anything about Meghan
obviously going to
Markle.
be of much comfort
Kate
to
gets a
her.
pass. I'm sure it's
She's had a
good with everyone, and whatever her reason is legit. So Kate gets a pass. Kate's all right. Meghan Markle?
Absolutely, and I think that being 96 and being a full working royal is an incredible.
I'm sure everybody
job.
there is
So,
like,
yeah, I'm actually very
who?
pleased
Meghan?
that
Who?
somebody
What?
has calmed her down a little bit. And yeah, she's been amazing.
I can't ask you. I know, of course, about specific details of your interactions with her. But what was it like to work with her, to help her? What was she like to? What is she like to talk to?
So the Queen and all of those that work with her are an incredible team, and it's amazing to have been part of that and to help many people through their service and maintain their health. So for me, working with that team was wonderful. It was an incredible experience and something that 7 years of that I will never forget. So it was wonderful. I would never release any information. It's just not what we do.
But there are specific challenges there, as you mentioned, about keeping the show on the road. I'm sure sometimes you have to do running repairs for the royals.
Well, I think like everybody, we have incidences, things happen. None of us are superheroes, unfortunately. So obviously there are things that need to be done in the course of prevention and protection, and making sure that everything that is undertaken by the royal family is safe. So yes, they do have teams in place in order to do that.
When you say making sure that everything is safe, do you mean just from a medical point of view? Because I've just been talking to a royal protection officer. We know the safety side of that. Where does that interact with the medical team?
Well, I think from a medical perspective, obviously all of the trips, the tours, etc., that the royal family do, that there will be a medical report that is made. But to be honest with you, when you're looking after such an important person and an important family, all of these things just need to be done.
Yeah, I suppose, yes, when you're talking about royal tours, then you've got inoculations, injections, diets, so many other issues.
Absolutely.
Well, Dr. Hemming, very good talking to you. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Anna Hemming there, who spent 7 years working alongside the royal household in Buckingham Palace, looking after their health. And in terms of the Queen's health at the moment, this is what we are hearing, a statement released by Buckingham Palace, the official spokespeople at Buckingham Palace here, saying that doctors are concerned about the Queen's health. Therefore, she has been put under medical supervision at Balmoral after that concern was raised. And as Dr. Hemming was telling us there, she is said to be comfortable. So many statements coming into us, statements of support from the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who was only there 2 days ago at Balmoral to meet Her Majesty the Queen, making that journey back there today. The senior members of the royal family, who we understand are gathering, either have gathered or are on their way to Balmoral.
Well, let's just update you with what's been happening at Balmoral within the last half an hour or so. We understand Princes Andrew and Edward, the Queen's sons, have arrived at Balmoral to be with the monarch, as has Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge, the Queen's grandson. And of course, after Prince Charles, heir to the throne. Prince Charles, we understand, arrived at Balmoral earlier on today. He has been in Scotland in recent days, so wasn't too far away when that call came that doctors are concerned about the Queen's health. The royal family was informed and the decision was taken that senior royals needed to go to Balmoral to be with the Queen. We understand that the Duke of Sussex is on his way as well. Prince Harry, we are expecting him to arrive at Aberdeen Airport and, like those before him, make that journey to Balmoral. Well, the Queen's former Scottish Communications Secretary, Louise Tate, joins me now. Louise, the Queen today has been described by historian Sir Anthony Selden, I was speaking to him earlier, as the nation's granny. She has always been there. And the world is watching. People are tuning into us today to find out how the Queen is. We watch and we wait. But it's important to remember that she is actually a granny. She's a mama, as Prince Charles calls her. And the family are gathering in Balmoral today. Perhaps you can give us an insight as to what it will be like inside Balmoral. It's a vast estate. It's a big structure. But the royal family and the Queen in particular occupies a smaller compartment. So it will be a very small family gathering in that sense.
As I think I've said before, Balmoral, it is a castle, but it's in terms of a castle, but it's still quite an intimate space. And I think that because they've spent so much time there as a family together, this will be, it's just like it is a home. It is a home, and they will feel that they are coming to that home, something that's familiar to them, and they know that that's where Her Majesty is very, very happy and always has been. So that I think that they will feel that they are around her in one of her favourite places at this time.
We're just showing viewers an image that was taken not so long ago, about half an hour or so ago, of Prince William driving his uncle Prince Andrew and Prince Edward into Balmoral. They arrived at Aberdeen Airport a little earlier and drove to Balmoral through those gates, and we assume are now with the Queen. We understand that Prince Harry is on his way. Let's go back to how this all began earlier on this afternoon, around 12:30 lunchtime. That statement was released by Buckingham Palace. And Louise, as a communications secretary, what will have gone into that? Because it came as a shock to so many people, because we saw the Queen publicly only on Tuesday inviting the new Prime Minister Liz Truss to form a government. We understand she carried out another engagement later in the day to award a member of her staff with an honour. That was a private matter. You know, we haven't got any pictures of that, but she was very much active until recently. So talk to me about what will have been going on in terms of putting that statement out there and the wording of it. So much thought and care will have gone into it.
Indeed, but I think that given that there was the Privy Council meeting was cancelled, that Her Majesty would not take part in that, and then if the message was to the family to come and join Her Majesty at Balmoral, it would have been very difficult for so many members of the family to make that journey without it being noticed. So I think that it was the right thing to do. It clarified the situation. Inevitably, it'll be seen as a significant move and things will be read into that. But it is a very carefully worded statement, and that's rightly so. And I think that they just tried to avoid speculation as much as they could by giving some clarity, really.
Louise, given that, and given that we know very clearly the Buckingham Palace do not provide a running commentary on anything, least of all the Queen's health, this statement is being seen as significant. When can we expect to hear something else? What kind of update will come? Will there come? Will any updates come? Because I'm just looking at this screen and I'm mindful of the fact that hundreds of thousands, millions of people across the world are going to be watching those gates. Will the palace be mindful of that, or will it be business as usual in terms of communications?
I think that really it will be business as usual. They are not going to give out running commentary. They're not going to follow the news cycle, unfortunately. This will be dictated by events as they happen or don't happen. So we will just have to wait, unfortunately.
Okay, Louise, you're watching and waiting with us, and as somebody who knows the Queen, I can only begin to understand how difficult that is. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us here on Sky News. I'm sure we will speak in the coming hours and days. Thank you.
Well, now watching and waiting here at Buckingham Palace as we keep our eyes on the gates of Balmoral Castle. I want to talk now to a professor of British politics and the Constitution at University College London and co-editor of The Role of Monarchy in Modern Democracy, Professor Robert Hazell. Very good to talk to you, Professor Hazell. Now, it's a difficult time for any nation when its head of state is under medical supervision because their doctors are concerned about their health.
Indeed, but this is a contingency which will have long been prepared for, and so people in government as well as in the palace will be rolling out those contingency plans. And there are two things that might happen. The Queen might become seriously ill, and if she becomes so ill that she is incapable, through infirmity of body or mind, of performing the royal functions, I'm quoting now from the Regency Act, then a regent would be appointed to carry out the functions of being the sovereign in her place, and that would be Prince Charles. So that's one kind of contingency plan, which people will have near the top of their minds. The other is, if sadly the Queen is very seriously ill and were to die, then there are very well rehearsed plans for a very grand royal funeral known as Operation London Bridge, and all that has been planned for years in advance, and it will be the biggest state funeral any of us have seen for a very long time, and possibly in the whole of our lifetimes.
So as you describe it, and as we understand it, there is never a moment, even a moment, when the United Kingdom is without a head of state, either a king or queen or a regent.
That's right. So the moment the Queen dies, Prince Charles becomes king, although formally that would be declared the next day at a special meeting of the Privy Council known as an Accession Council. A regency is slightly different in that it has to be formally declared by 3 out of 4 very senior officials, and those are the Lord Chancellor, the Lord Chief Justice, the Speaker of the House of Commons, and the Lord Chancellor. So they will all have been briefed about their role.
You see, this is probably too small, right?
If is declared, it can only be done on the basis of evidence, including medical evidence, which will be submitted.
It's a picture of Kate. It says, everyone knows that Kate, not Meghan, is America's favorite princess. And it's got that photo of Kate.
If a regency has been created, and the regent would then be Prince Charles. And he would be regent.
And that's on Twitter.
Acting in the name of the Queen, not only of the United Kingdom, but of all the other 14 countries around the world, where the Queen is also head of state. Let us not forget, she's Queen of Australia, Queen of Canada, Queen of New Zealand, Queen of Jamaica, Queen of other places in the Caribbean and in the Pacific.
And Professor Hazel, just give me your assessment of how Her Majesty negotiates this. I mean, it's a rather extraordinary, is it a unique role in terms of the British Constitution and how it has just evolved and the separation of powers?
Well, as everyone acknowledges, she has been an extraordinarily conscientious monarch. She has devoted the whole of her life.
Most likely what will happen as soon as her passing is announced, if it's
the Queen receives state boxes.
If it happens early today or early in the day,
not many people work.
The new head king, the new king, I guess Charles, King Charles, he will address, the country.
But also for the extraordinary devotion.
And tickets will be available. I guess people can attend that stuff.
I think I needn't say any more than that. This is very well.
Let's see. It says trumpeters will give 3 blasts outside Friary Court, and a genealogist will proclaim King Charles III.
Robert Hazel, thank you very much.
That's pretty cool to watch. Have you seen The King's Speech, the movie, The King's Speech? Pretty awesome movie. And there, actually, Queen Elizabeth is in that movie as a young child.
Have arrived, have gone through those
And
gates.
when you watch the movie and you see his kids, you're like, oh, damn, she's ends up being the queen, in the future.
Driven from Aberdeen Airport, driven in the lead vehicle by Prince William.
And so obviously with
next to him was his uncle
Charles in charge, just kidding, with Charles as the king, Camilla Parker becomes Queen Camilla.
Harry, who we expect at some point.
And I don't know. I don't know how I feel about her. I don't know how I ever felt about her. Kind of,
early in the morning. He had actually been due to take
kind
part
of.
in a royal visit in central Scotland, but that was cancelled, and that was the first
Seems a little
inkling
squirrely.
he had that things weren't quite right today. I can tell you the weather.
I won't go as far as saying I know she's been. I've heard she's been called.
Extremely heavily.
No, actually, I heard Austin Powers talk about someone like that, a little mannish.
In the drawing room.
But I don't know. She just seems a little squirrely to me. You know what I mean? Squirrely, just.
Liz Truss, she made that Aberdeen airport to Balmoral.
Because that whole situation that happened was not a good one. So.
The Queen was in good form. She remarked
But she's
on the
in.
weather, saying to her press secretary,
Yeah, exactly, Lauren. I don't think she's worthy either. But.
Dark it was in the skies overhead. She's well used
Too
to
bad
it.
for Diana.
Quite enjoys.
She was a cool person.
This part of the world, notwithstanding the weather.
So yeah, I'm not a fan of Camilla being in there either. But.
Time of year when she and the family
Oh well.
enjoy summer holidays together, and it is a place of.
But yeah, The King's Speech, awesome movie. The other one I like is The Darkest Hour.
Well-practiced routine, albeit
Winston Churchill, you know.
Through time, they have barbecue.
What's his name? Gary.
Sleepovers. Grandchildren and great grandchildren are invited to
I can't remember his name right now.
family gathering on the Balmoral estate. Harry.
Gary Oldman. Sorry, I had to look it up. Gary Oldman in The Darkest Hour. Phenomenal film. And I started to watch Dunkirk the other day. I got to finish watching that. But well-made movies, real good. If you're if it's a little difficult for you to watch because of the language, you know, the accent and how they speak, and you can actually just put the subtitles on. You can read it all. Makes it easier. It's actually pretty good. Great movies. Start off with The King's Speech.
News at Balmoral for us this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Well, let's talk now to the editor of the Crown Chronicles, Victoria Howard. Thank you for joining us, Victoria. And first of all, your reaction to this statement from Buckingham Palace about the Queen's health, about the fact she's under medical supervision, and doctors are concerned about her health.
It's highly unusual for them to comment in such a straightforward way. We often get from the palace these kind of allusions to something not being right, you know, undergoing examinations or tests. So for them to say she is ill is quite significant, and for them to make a statement about it, that the family are also visiting, hugely, hugely significant. And I think that we can therefore draw the conclusions that this is a very serious situation with regards to the health of the monarch.
And in terms of what they let us know because we're not trying to intrude, but because we are all concerned, they are being very careful about what they've said subsequently, Buckingham Palace.
Absolutely. Of course, they're saying this because it's important that we know she is our monarch, she's our head of state, she's a core component of the constitutional monarchy and the way the government works. So it is important that people are made aware of these things. However, they kind of don't want to give too much away. We only have to think, of course, it was so long ago, but when George VI passed in 1952, the cards were played very close to the chest. The announcement wasn't made for a while, of course, to let the family kind of deal with that initial shock of the event itself. But I do think it's important that we know. We don't necessarily need all those details, that the public will just run with those. And of course, you know, they want to keep us assured she is under great medical care. She's got some of the best medical teams around the world. But to give us any further details would probably be inappropriate, as she is a public figure, but of course she has a private life too.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? This is for the family first and foremost. But I mean, she's not just a national figure, she's an international figure, one of the best known people in the entire world.
Exactly. So there's public interest naturally, and that's why we see many things that with the way the royal family works. For example, the first day of school for Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, we get a little insight into that day. We get a photo release of the event itself, but then they are allowed to go on as normal people as possible, of course, with that kind of royal status hanging over them. it's just important that they do keep us in the loop, though, because not only is she, part of the system, the functioning system of government, people really respect her. She's been our monarch for 70 years, and for them to be kept in the loop after a platinum jubilee that went off so well, she clearly really enjoyed that. Thousands of people came to London to join in those celebrations with her. I think they're just very conscious of the fact of the goodwill that people have for the Queen. So just want to kind of steer it. And I think this is part of that process that's been happening for a while now, with us seeing Prince Charles as this next king. This is, of course, what we all think about when we hear these kind of worrying statements about her health. And it's just the natural progress of life, of course. But many people have kind of been worried about Charles as the next king. So this is them setting that up. And he has been stepping up in terms of duties for a number of months, if not years.
Indeed, a number of years. And we saw that, I suppose, particularly at the state opening of Parliament. And this is being carefully managed, the idea that there is a team, an experienced team.
Exactly. And of course, this sort of plan has been in place for a very long time to deal with the eventual time that the Queen passes. We all know it's been trending on Twitter today. London Bridge is the code name for that plan. And it's just the process, which is militarily precisely organised, that everyone knows exactly what happens and what the processes and next steps are to move with that succession, to keep things going for the British monarchy. So, of course, many people at the palace and within the royal teams are actually former military personnel or are on secondment to the palace from the armed forces. So you can just imagine how strictly controlled and precise all of these plans are.
And Victoria, just tell us a bit about Balmoral itself. We saw Her Majesty receiving Boris Johnson as Prime Minister and then asking Liz Truss to become Prime Minister just 2 days ago. She wasn't able to travel to London for that changeover because of the mobility issues we all knew she had. But Balmoral is the place that is perhaps closest to her heart, and indeed the royal family's heart, and has been for many, many years and generations.
Exactly. So Balmoral was actually built by Prince Albert and Queen Victoria in the mid 1800s, sorry, and it became this gathering place for them during the summer holidays. So for them to continue that tradition, the monarchy loves tradition. The royals do like that kind of reassuring nature of things. So every generation since has returned to Balmoral for this kind of summer gathering and holiday. It's often cited, of course, being located in the middle of the Scottish Highlands as a real place where they can actually relax. There are no cameras around because it's all private land, that they can enjoy their outdoor pursuits without, worrying people seeing them, for example. And they are very much an outdoorsy family, so enjoying walks and hikes, fishing, etc. And it's really just a place they really enjoy that relaxation time that they just simply can't get in London, partly because of all the duties, but partly because of the nature of the city and the people that are always around them. So that photo of the Queen meeting Liz Truss, she was in her tartan skirt and a cardigan, much more relaxed, much more informal than kind of her usual day wear that we might see. And I think that's just really reflective of the place it holds in their heart. It does feel like a home, because it isn't more of an office as Buckingham Palace or Windsor, for example.
Good to talk to you, Victoria. Thank you very much indeed. Victoria Howard there from the Crown Chronicles.
Well, joining me now is the historian and author Sir Anthony Selden. Sir Anthony, it's important to remember that so many people watching today around the world, the Queen is not just the sovereign of the UK, but also of 14 Commonwealth realms in addition as well. This really does have the eyes of the world on it today.
Isn't it incredible? There's no leader in the world who has been there almost continuously since the end of the Second World War. The most photographed, the most famous face in the world. A lot of Britain's place in the world is dependent upon her. A lot of people come to London, including presidents of the United States. to visit her. They're keener on visiting her in Buckingham Palace or Windsor than prime ministers who, for all their strengths, they come and they go. 15 in the life of Her Majesty, and let's hope there'll be more, although Liz Truss would probably hope not too soon, not too many more. So an extraordinary figure. Also just reflecting there that one thing that she does have is that at least she can be assured about the continuity of her family. One of the most enduring anxieties for her predecessors as the monarch of England all the way back to the Norman Conquest in 1066 has been, will there be somebody to succeed? It worried her predecessor Elizabeth I greatly, who died without child, and Victoria did have the Prince of Wales, who became Edward VII, but she was very worried about him and whether he really would step up to the mark and whether he was a little bit too interested in the big things, in the luxuries of life to take the job seriously. In the end, actually, he did quite well.
Can we talk about the Queen's years of service, 70 years, recently celebrating her Platinum Jubilee? The Queen is a hard-working royal. We're just looking at pictures of her out and about. These are the public engagements that we see. There is so much that we don't see.
Absolutely, and she is, let us remember, the head of state. So the Prime Minister comes to the head of state to be invited to form a government. The Queen isn't invited by anybody at all. She is the sovereign. She is the ultimate authority, although that sovereignty is shared, obviously, with Parliament. But she is the linchpin of the Constitution. She sees all the papers, as we were hearing. She knows deeply, has a wisdom, has an institutional memory, has an understanding of all the issues, all the personalities in this country and abroad, possessed by nobody else. So prime ministers do find it a privilege to listen to her. And if they are wise, and many of them have been, they do listen to her and they do follow that advice. Of course, we'll never, ever know what that advice is because it is a great hidden part of the Constitution that we will never know what the monarch and the says as head of state to the head of government. But extraordinarily hardworking, and she's kept going. And you know, isn't that remarkable? 70 years still to be working. 36 years beyond the age of 60, when many people have retired. The way she kept going after the death of her beloved husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, that's a contrast, isn't it, with Queen Victoria, who went into hiding after her husband, Prince Albert, died and made the monarchy very unpopular. But the Queen was straight back at us, and she was doing her work in private and in public to keep going, indefatigable, extraordinarily heroic. So the most famous person in the world, and justifiably so.
So Anthony, you touched on it earlier. The Queen is all most of us, the majority of us, have ever known. This second Elizabethan age we have lived in. Can you put into historical context Queen Elizabeth II? How important and historical figure in the decades to come is this monarch going to be?
Well, enormous because of longevity, the longest serving monarch. Female monarchs are long lasting. Elizabeth I, 1588 to 1603, and Queen Victoria, 1837 to 1901, 64 years, outdone by the Queen. Of course, we must remember that the earlier monarchs, before the extension of the voting in the 19th century, it was the head of state, the monarch, who had the real ultimate power, and power has passed in the last 100 years progressively to the politicians, to the prime minister. So you can't really compare her to, say, Elizabeth I or Henry VIII or Edward III, because they had such different jobs that they were doing. They really were the people who ran the country and terrorized the country. And yet we can contrast her with the politicians who she served with other monarchs abroad. And she has defined the era. In 100 years' time, people will write about the Elizabethan era. And maybe this is the moment that we stop talking about the post-war period and we see the period as ending with the death, when it comes, of Queen Elizabeth II. So I think an importance politically, but also psychologically for all of us, the fact that she is so important. She is the nation's grandmother, and I think her death will remind us, when it comes, of our own losses and sadnesses, because that's the kind of figure she is, including children. The Paddington Bear at the Platinum Jubilee, just an extraordinary showing, as was the James Bond during the Olympics. I mean, who would think that this lady in her 80s and 90s could keep with it, could keep relevant even to children?
She has a resonance with so many people, and that's reflected in so many of the messages we're getting here this evening at Sky News from people watching as we watch and wait for an update on the Queen's health from Balmoral. So, Anthony Selden, thank you.
Let's go live now to Downing Street. Our political correspondent, Joe Pike, is there. And Joe, this is quite an extraordinary day. The news of the deterioration in the Queen's health coming on a day that politically could define Liz Truss's premiership.
Exactly, Dermot. Today was perhaps the most significant announcement of Liz Truss's premiership, the most expensive one, perhaps, £150 billion. Some estimate this big energy bills package will cost. And it was during a debate on that topic in the House of Commons that Nadeem Zahawi, a Cabinet Office Minister, passed a note to Liz Truss, spoke to the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, and also Keir Starmer, the opposition leader, was spoken to. Clearly, from the body language and the faces of these senior politicians, something concerning had happened. And indeed, Liz Truss, Keir Starmer and other party leaders have tweeted messages of concern. Certainly there has been a sense in Westminster, in Whitehall, here at Number 10, for the past year, I think, that although the Queen's central constitutional role as head of state has not changed, will not change, the way she has undertaken it certainly has. We saw that at the state opening of Parliament, the Queen's speech, as some call it, where that speech was delivered not by the Queen, but by her son, the Prince of Wales, with the Duke of Cambridge sitting alongside him. We also, of course, saw a change this week with that handover of power, Boris Johnson resigning and Liz Truss being asked to form an administration. Normally, of course, Dermot, those politicians would, well, the outgoing Prime Minister would travel from here, from 10 Downing Street, a mile away to where you are in Buckingham Palace, and said it was a 500-mile journey to Balmoral, that private, secluded castle that has been a home of monarchs right back to the time of Queen Victoria in the 1850s. Also, I think significant that last night a Privy Council meeting was due to be taking place, the Privy Council being this group of senior government advisors. Now, the Queen would have presided over that meeting using video conferencing software from Balmoral. It would not have been a face-to-face meeting, and yet at the last moment, a couple of hours I think before it was due to take place, it was not cancelled but postponed, and we were told by Buckingham Palace that the Queen's doctors were advising her to rest. That would have been the moment where Liz Truss would have taken the oath to become First Lord of the Treasury, a title she holds alongside Prime Minister. First Lord of the Treasury are the only words on the letterbox of Number 10 Downing Street on that front door. So these events happening in a different way were signs clearly of a shift. And I think it's also worth reflecting on the a role the Queen has provided, not in public, but in private to prime ministers, and a role she has continued to provide with wisdom and counsel, that wisdom being particularly valuable partly because of her longevity and the continuity that she has provided as well. Many of the prime ministers that she has counselled, supported, worked alongside, often through crises, through times of change, many of them are now figures in history books, figures whose decisions are debated on by historians, by school students, by university students, people like Winston Churchill, but of course Eden, Macmillan, more recently Edward Heath, Margaret Thatcher. The Queen has, through 15 prime ministers, provided that continuity, and her advice, I think, is so valued because of her longevity. There has been a change. She is in her 10th decade. She has occupied that role now for 7 decades. If you speak to people in Westminster who have met her, who've known her, albeit briefly, there is this strange mix that she is a familiar face for them and for many of us, and yet still she remains, I think, Dermot, a pretty enigmatic figure.
Joe Pike, many thanks.
Well, joining me now, Dean of Miami Herbert Business School at the University of Miami, John Quelch, who was awarded his CBE by the Queen back in 2011. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon here on Sky News. First of all, how has the news of the Queen's health being received in Miami today?
The Queen is an extraordinarily admired figure in the United States as well as worldwide, and perhaps next to the Pope is perhaps the most recognized apolitical international figure on the world stage. She is extraordinarily admired in Boston, where I was present in 1976 when she visited for the US Centennial, and in all parts of the United States. I think there's a deep affection and admiration for this consummate, quiet leader.
Can you talk to me about your experience with the Queen, your meeting of the Queen back in 2011 when you were awarded the CBE? Talk to us about the day and what she said to you.
Well, it was a magnificent day, and as all of those who are privileged to receive an award from the British monarchy know, you approach Buckingham Palace with the hope that the Royal Standard will be flying over Buckingham Palace, because that means the Queen is in residence and she is going to preside over the ceremony at which you will receive your award. I think the most important impression and reflection I can give you from this occasion, and I have met the Queen on a couple of other occasions as well, but on this occasion, the curiosity, the attentiveness to responses that I gave, and the feeling that even though she said only a few words to me, that I had had a personal and intimate conversation with her. And this, I think, was one of her great strengths that perhaps is not commented on that often. In order to lead effectively for 70 years, you have to be very conserving of your energy. And I think she developed a capability to lead while saying little, but projecting a tremendous amount of capability and attentiveness, as I've said, to every person who came into contact with her.
A special occasion to meet the Queen, and many would say a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but you have been privileged enough to meet the Queen on a number of occasions, as you say. Perhaps we could just talk a little bit more about how the Queen is seen in America. You touched on it earlier. Given that the Queen has no official connection with the United States, she's obviously Queen of Commonwealth nations as well as the UK, but considering there isn't that link with the United States, why is there such a special affection for Queen Elizabeth II there?
I think because she's such a unique figure. There is no individual in the United States that I can think of who's held a leadership role for 70 years in a corporation or in any organization, let alone the political arena. So she is a unique and exceptional person in this regard. And that, of course, is part of her fascination. But at the same time, I believe she's admired because she doesn't project drama. She projects continuity and solidity and integrity. And these are all qualities that in many leaders today on the world stage, we don't find sufficient abundance of. So there are qualities to her leadership style and her approach to managing family affairs, if I can go down to that personal level, that I think all Americans and citizens around the world can learn from and take lessons from.
John Quelch, lovely words there about the Queen. John Quelch, who was awarded CBE by the Queen back in 2011. Thank you very much for joining us here on Sky News this evening.
Good evening. This is Sky News live from Buckingham Palace. Senior royals have gathered at Balmoral after confirmation that the Queen is under medical supervision because the doctors have become concerned about her health. All of the Queen's children are thought to now be at her side in Balmoral. Prince Charles was seen leaving Dumfries House in Ayrshire to travel to Aberdeenshire. And a bit later on, a plane landed at Aberdeen Airport carrying members of the royal family. That included Prince William and Prince Andrew. In a statement, Buckingham Palace said, following further evaluation this morning, the Queen's doctors are concerned for Her Majesty's health and have recommended that she remain under medical supervision. The Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. The Prime Minister then tweeted that the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. She continued, "My thoughts and the thoughts of people across our United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time." The Archbishop of Canterbury tweeted, "My prayers and the prayers of the people across the Church of England and the nation are with Her Majesty the Queen today." It continues, "May God's presence strengthen and comfort Her Majesty, her family, and those who are caring for her at Balmoral." Let's bring in our royal correspondent now, Rhiannon Mills. And Rhiannon, do we understand now that all the senior members of the royal family are now at Balmoral?
So it seems that the only person who may well be missing at the moment from Balmoral is Prince Harry, who purely by luck is in this country this week carrying out a series of engagements. So we are still waiting to find out when he is going to arrive. But yes, we saw other members of the royal family arriving in the last couple of hours after having to fly all the way up from here, all the way up to Aberdeenshire. We know that Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall were already in the area. They were already staying at Birk Hall and also due to carry out some engagements in Scotland, both today and tomorrow. So they got there very quickly. Also, Princess Anne, she was also in the area because she'd carried out engagements. But then this afternoon, we saw the cars carrying Prince William, the Earl and Countess of Wessex, so Prince Edward and Sophie, and also Prince Andrew, because we heard actually quite early on today that members of the royal family had been informed that doctors had decided that the Queen should remain under medical supervision because they were concerned about her health. And the palace, I think, surprising that they should give us that information in itself, but also further surprise the fact that they decided to announce that members of the family would be gathering up in Balmoral. Of course, the palace, not an institution that likes to cause unnecessary worry, concern, or attention. But of course, the fact that we have this statement saying that the doctors have been concerned about her, and now her family are gathering, is inevitably going to cause worry and also, I think, a degree of shock for many of us. You were just seeing pictures there of Tuesday, where the Queen very clearly had told her advisors that she wanted to be the one who, again, carried out the appointment of yet another Prime Minister. Yes, arrangements had to be changed to allow that to happen, but she was still very much front and centre carrying out those constitutional duties. The pictures that we're seeing at the moment, actually a year ago, and it does show you just how much things have changed for the Queen. Over the last 12 months, we have seen her carrying out fewer duties, fewer responsibilities, and we have regularly been told by the palace that she was having those episodic mobility issues. But also, I think the palace and the mechanisms that the team around her wanting to make sure that at all times they could adjust the plans and make sure they could facilitate things as much as possible to allow her to continue to carry out her duties. Undoubtedly, this is going to come as a worry to many across the country. But I think for the Queen, certainly her carrying out her duties on Tuesday was once again a sign that that pledge she made when she was just 21 and reinforced this year to mark her Platinum Jubilee, she was and continues to be determined to carry out her duties. And her family, of course, now there to support her in Balmoral.
And of course, Rhiannon, Her Majesty's been at Balmoral all summer, as she has been every summer.
That's right. It's a place that she loves, and you can see why when you travel up to that very secluded part of the Highlands. I went for a look around Balmoral earlier in the summer, and there's a wildness to it. And for a family who we know they love their country pursuits, we know that the Queen is never happier than when she's surrounded by her dogs and also her horses as well. And over the years, many people have talked about how they may well catch a glimpse of the Queen out on her ponies as she's been spending time in Balmoral. But it's also a really important family time for her. And actually in the past, I've spoken to the likes of Prince Edward and Prince William about those family times, because you can't forget, for the Queen, 70 years of remarkable public service, 365 days of the year, always looking at those red boxes full of state papers, but also trying to balance family life. And Balmoral is a place where I think to a degree she felt she could do that. And for all of those family members who we can see there in that car, I think now they will be at Balmoral, where of course they've had so many wonderful memories that they have shared with the Queen, but also no doubt catching up with the doctors, trying to get the updates of exactly how she's doing, how she's feeling as we await updates from Buckingham Palace.
And just on the doctors, presumably she has had constant medical attention over the past few years.
Well, I think what's been so interesting about the Queen, and why probably the last 12 months have been a surprise to many, as we've seen her in a way handing over some of those responsibilities, is throughout her life she has really enjoyed relatively good health. And we've had the odd cataract operation, or she's had the odd issue potentially with walking. About 6 years ago she was seen with a walking stick, but that soon went. And I was always struck by the fact that well into her 90s, she's continued to carry out things that many people in their 80s wouldn't be able to do. For example, walking that long length of Westminster Abbey, or walking up those steep steps at St. Paul's, completely unaided, completely unassisted. And so for some people, it has been a shock that she has had to hand over some of those responsibilities, has had to at times say, well, I can't do that. I just can't do that today. But she is 96 years old. But I think what we saw on Tuesday was that resolve to do what she can. And her family increasingly over the last 12 months have been there standing by. Of course, we saw it on the Platinum Jubilee weekend. They were all there around her on the Thursday. She was there on the balcony. She was lighting the first beacon. But then it did take it out of her. She had to relax for a couple of days, rest up for a couple of days. And that was where the family stepped in. But also, I think what's been striking over the last 12 months is the Queen has been showing us that she has got great faith in the future, surrounded by the likes of Prince William and Kate, Prince Charles and Camilla, saying, look, I have real faith in the future, and you should too.
Rhiannon, thank you very much.
Oh, well, crowds have been gathering at Buckingham Palace this evening. News broke at around 12:30 this afternoon. That statement coming from Buckingham Palace about the Queen's health, saying that her doctors were concerned for Her Majesty's health and recommended that she remain under medical supervision, adding that the Queen remains comfortable and at Balmoral. The Queen may not be at Buckingham Palace, but it is very much a focus for those well-wishers who want to head there and send their best wishes to the Queen. We've had no update officially since that statement. We were informed, though, that the Queen's close family were told, and they have since been making their way to Balmoral. Within the last hour or so, we've seen Princes William, Edward and Andrew arrive. Prince William driving Prince Edward and his wife Sophie Wessex and Prince Andrew from Aberdeen Airport to Balmoral to see the Queen. Prince Charles was in Ayrshire, we understand. He took a helicopter to Aberdeenshire, to the Balmoral estate earlier on in the day before that statement came out. And as we understand it, we are now waiting for the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry, to arrive at Balmoral. We understand he is making his way there. He is yet to arrive. Well, let's head to Balmoral and our Scotland correspondent, James Matthews. James, despite the weather, which pretty much sums up the mood this afternoon, crowds are gathering at Buckingham Palace. What's happening there at the Balmoral estate?
Yeah, well, crowds-wise, not a lot, actually. Yes, it's the tourist season, but on this filthy day in terms of the weather, there's something like a couple of dozen tourists around, many media here, of course, to see comings and goings at the gates of the Balmoral estate. And we saw the arrival within the past hour of a 4-vehicle convoy. Leading that convoy was Prince William at the wheel of a vehicle that had the Duke of York, his uncle, in the passenger seat, and in the rear seats were Edward and Sophie. I think it's fair to say all were grim-faced as they entered the gates to widen the family gathering around the Queen. Prince Charles, as you said, Sarah Jane, was already inside. He has been inside Balmoral for some hours today. He was due at a royal event in the Central Belt, and that's the first inkling that anybody had that things were not as they should be today when that particular event had to be cancelled. He has substituted, of course, for his mother over recent weeks. Last Saturday, it was the Braemar gathering. She would normally attend that. It's one of the events here that is a big draw for the royal family. The Queen particularly enjoys the children's sack race. It's an event that she would typically attend, but not this year. Prince Charles attended the Braemar Highland Games. He also spent some time with his mother on Saturday, several hours, I'm told, and he has been here for a few weeks, as is she. I mean, she's here for a couple of months every year at this time of year. It is the base of her summer holiday, and those around her make the point that in terms of where she will continuously sleep in the one place, this is it, Balmoral. She spends 3 months in the one place, in the one bed, and it's a place, of course, that she's very fond of. She has changed her routine in accordance with her declining health. Normally, she would attend Crathie Kirk every Sunday. COVID, of course, changed that in the initial months, but ever since COVID, she's not attended church. Charles has gone to the nearby Crathie Kirk, but for the Queen, the minister has crossed and worship has taken place within Balmoral Castle itself. In the months of COVID, it took place inside one of the large rooms inside that property with some distance between the Queen and the visiting minister. She has looked relatively well. People who have seen her in recent weeks lunching with her lady-in-waiting at Inchnabobbert Cottage at Glenmick, picnicking at her mother's old fishing hut by the the River Dee. They say that when they've seen her out and about, she's looked fine and relatively healthy, healthier, I'm told, than she did in the past couple of months over the course of the Platinum Jubilee and so on. She's been walking the corgis, walking with a stick and without. And of course, we saw her on Tuesday, the last time we saw her publicly, when she appointed Liz Truss as Prime Minister. The people who were in that room before the Prime Minister arrived, the press secretary and press photographer, they speak about her joking about the dark skies over Balmoral, dark skies that she has become well used to in a place where she has enjoyed,
Well, the crowds are gathering. Giovanna, Kate, thank you so much for the super stickers.
Concern clearly, not just among the
Oh, you're very welcome, Giovanna. Thank you, Kate. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
25 years ago, almost.
And
Sarah Jane, when there was another
the porn
dark day when Princess
spam
Diana
is
died.
back.
I remember Prince William, Prince
You
Harry's
can get rid
young
of that
children
stuff.
walking up this particular road,
So
taking a look at
refresh the
floral
page.
tributes.
So somebody
They
already
will be
attempted to delete it, but it still
behind
shows
the
up.
gates
You
of
guys see it
Balmoral
still?
Estate in the
I
next
can
few
see it there.
hours, assuming that's when Prince Harry arrives here, probably via Aberdeen Airport. So a family gathering. They're used to family gatherings here in good times and in bad.
Yeah, that's a sobering reminder, James, of what we are watching unfold. As James Matthews has been saying,
Yeah, I would totally go there.
majority of
If it was like
Singapores are behind those gates
somewhere
at
nearby,
Balmoral with the Queen. We
I could see
are
where
just waiting for Prince Harry, the Duke
I
of
would do
Sussex,
that.
who we understand is making his way at Balmoral to be.
She's been
with
in
his
power
family. The
for,
world
I
is
think,
watching
something
and
like
waiting for an update
70 years
on
or
the
at least
Queen's health.
70
And
years.
important to remember that this time that it is a family that is dealing with the ill health of a mother and a grandmother, 96 years of age.
Yeah, 70.
Thank you, Sarah Jane. Well, here
I
at
thought I
Buckingham
heard. I
Palace,
thought I heard it was
yes,
about
indeed,
70 years.
we're watching and waiting. The world is watching and waiting because although Her Majesty the Queen and the members of the royal family are at Balmoral, it's here where you get the information from 6 hours or so ago when that statement was released about the concerns about the Queen's health.
And I'll stick to what I'm
She's now
thinking is that
well, as
she's.
we wait, I'm joined now by Dick Griffin.
I think she's gone already. They're just waiting for the family to assemble. So that
Just how long in total did you work in royal
then they'll make a formal announcement.
I was there like man and boy.
She has passed with her family around her, and
Was that all in the service or
No, I came in initially.
I honestly think that's going to happen in the next few hours,
And after a year, I was transferred to,
or at least sometime from now, and overnight.
3 years.
I think that's what'll
And
happen.
then I was promoted and spent 13 and a half years looking after Duke of Edinburgh. And then 1999.
And I don't know, of all the world leaders, of many of the world leaders, she seemed to be one of the more normal people, right?
Just tell me your thoughts at this time after that statement. It was a real jolt for everyone.
Oh, I mean, it's devastation. I mean, I was lucky enough to be so close to them, and I was probably as close to them as some of my own family. So to hear such sad news, while we pray to God it'll turn out good news, it's not looking good. So I'm prepared for the worst.
Indeed. Tell us about Her Majesty. I mean, you were in a privileged, a lucky position, as you say. What a wonderful job to have. Talk to me about the relationship you built up with her.
Well, you're lucky enough the protection officers who work there, like all the personal staff, you do build up a very special relationship with her. And after all, you're always conscious of
And that situation where you want to wait for,
so you never step over the line. But she's so considerate.
you don't want to just announce it. I'm sure they want the entire family there, and I don't even think it's.
Duty time.
I don't even think it's a
And we talk about
situation where, what's that called, a death pool, where everybody's betting on what time she's going to die or this or that.
Just the two of you.
I mean, I know that happens, and I would hate to think it's for that reason, but I'm thinking it's more because they're waiting for family to gather and to arrive and that kind of thing.
It was clearly
So,
Your Majesty and Mum, but somebody asked me this afternoon. I was giving a talk.
yeah, and it wasn't necessarily a dead pool. We used to, they always say that
as the Queen never shouted at me.
celebrity deaths come in threes.
And
So anytime there were two, which were relatively close, we would try to guess who's next, who's next. And for some years after that, I was thinking, man, that's not a nice thing to say. You know,
Months up there over the years during those.
you're not wishing on anyone to die.
Balmoral was, I was so lucky because.
So I quit participating in that kind of thing.
2000 and let me think, 2013 and 2000.
I think a visit to, I mean, it is a historic place. You know, Buckingham Palace is definitely something to put on your wish list, on your bucket list. Oh, do we lose a feed? What happened?
Be the policeman for a diamond
Oh, there we
jubilee,
go.
a platinum jubilee, yeah. And you know, so I had to ring my wife up and say, "Guess what, dear? I'm not retiring. I'm staying on for another 5 years."
And being the Queen, she had the power to do that. I mean, were there any rules within the Met at the time that you had to retire at a certain age?
Well, strange enough, there used to be. The chief inspector, you had to retire at the age 56 or 57. They changed it slightly, and for me carrying on, I mean, I carried on till I was 62, which is probably a bit long in the tooth. That's why.
Yeah, I haven't caught up to why Kate isn't there, but
The Queen will have a 70-year-old protection officer.
Got to ask you about those
like I
silly
said,
moments. I mean, you
Kate gets a
mentioned that
pass.
one of the most
Meghan Markle doesn't.
memorable, the most difficult when the barriers were breached, so to speak, at Buckingham Palace.
A lot of people don't like Meghan Markle. A lot of people in the palace don't like Meghan Markle for whatever their reasons are.
82.
I'm not going to pretend I know.
I was part of
I'm not
the
from
team that came
there,
in as a result of Michael
but
Fagan.
it's no secret, right?
And it was a catalogue of errors.
But just from what I've heard in interviews and seen her in interviews,
30, 40 times a night.
she's just not my kind of
Switch them off and
real
rely on the
people.
army and the police to deter intruders. As it happened, Fagan found a blind spot. Climbed
I
over
would like to think that, I think somebody else mentioned it in the comments too, that
Buckingham Palace. And of course, 3 in the morning.
when that does happen and the Queen passes,
There was alcohol, cigarettes,
that they would just
and
pay their respects and, you know, to be there, unless it's requested by the family for her not to be there. Well, that's
And of course, on the second time,
a whole other story.
he found his way. He didn't realise. I mean, there's not a sign on the Queen's bedroom door. The Queen sleeps here. It was sheer chance, and in he goes, sits on the Queen's bed. Now you can imagine if it happened to you and I, we'd wake up alarmed, and the Queen woke up. Who are you?
And by the way, I am working on a
Quickly got dispelled by that. And fortunately, so well, who are
next
you?
live show. Don't forget tonight, I've got the Camille Playhouse locally here in Brownsville.
Call the police. And unfortunately,
Tonight is their,
arrived on the scene and
we'll do a quick
out.
live
I mean, worrying as that incident was, it's a real
prior to their
insight,
opening night of next week. Thursday of next week is their opening night for their production of Pippin.
alone with a
So we're going to talk about them, talk about that with them for a little bit tonight, 8 o'clock Central.
talked them down and she had the
Yeah,
presence to
it's always a fun time with them. They're a nice group of people over
I
there.
mean, she initially rang her footman, but
And then I am working on a
palace switchboard. Can you get a police officer sent to my room? Kept calm.
show,
So calm.
taking my notes here,
Switchboard operator didn't realise
about
what was
narcissism.
routine. Rang the sergeant in the
So I've got that in the works for the next few days.
Go up to the Queen's apartment and see what you want.
Trying to find the right time to do that. It's not going to be Friday. Friday night is a bad time to, I think,
And that's why it probably took him
unless it's later. It's a bad time for a live show. Everybody's off of work. It's the weekend, spending time with family, or just, you know, going out and letting loose a little bit. So probably not Friday.
Well, in the past few minutes, President Biden's press secretary has given her reaction to news of the Queen's condition.
Oh boy.
The president has been briefed and will be updated throughout the day on the concerning news out of the United Kingdom about Queen Elizabeth's health. His and the First Lady's thoughts are with the Queen and her family today. The president also conveyed to Prime Minister Truss during a previously scheduled video conference this morning that he and Dr. Biden are thinking of the Queen, her family, and the people of the United Kingdom.
So that's President Biden conveying his thoughts and prayers to Prime Minister Liz
Thoughts and
Truss
prayers. Thoughts and
in
prayers.
the wake of this news about the Queen and concerns over her health.
Did you guys see her the press conference. I'm not sure when it was. I want to say it was yesterday, but it might have been weeks ago, where there's a reporter
and have recommended she remain under
from at one of these press briefings, a reporter from Africa who wanted to get a question in, and she would not allow her to speak. She would not allow her to get the question in. That was such a weird exchange.
Monitoring the comings and goings, and as far as we are aware, it is just the Duke of Sussex still to arrive. However, he may have arrived unbeknownst to cameras, but that is the situation we understand at the moment. Well, the Prime Minister was notified in the House of Commons of the news. This was as she was briefing MPs about her cost of living rescue plan. Then the Commons Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, gave a statement.
I know I speak on behalf of the entire House when I say that we send our best wishes to Her Majesty the Queen, and that she and the royal family are in our thoughts and prayers at this moment.
The Hoyle addressing the House after the Prime Minister and the Labour leader were informed of the development from Buckingham Palace. It was quite the dramatic moment in the House of Commons, effectively politics being suspended for the day. Let's go live to Downing Street. Our political correspondent Joe Pike has been following events. Joe.
I don't know. I'm sticking to my story that she's passed. That's what I'm thinking.
That was Nadeem Zahawi, a cabinet office minister, passing a note to the PM, also speaking to.
I'm thinking she's passed. I would hate to think that she's about to pass and they're kind of got her on life support so that until the family gets there. That's messed up. So who knows how they do these things and why they do them.
From either of the main party leaders, Liz Truss remains working here at Downing Street. Her spokesperson saying she has no plans to travel to Scotland. But Liz Truss has put out a message of concern, I think, on Twitter. She has said this: the whole country will be deeply concerned by the news from Buckingham Palace this lunchtime. My thoughts and the thoughts of people across our United Kingdom are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time. Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, tweeted,
of the Bed Bath &
along
Beyond
with the rest
executive.
of the country, I am deeply worried by the news from Buckingham Palace this afternoon. My thoughts are with Her Majesty the Queen and her family at this time, and I join everyone across the United Kingdom in hoping for her recovery. I think it's worth pointing out that party leaders like Keir Starmer and now Liz Truss will have sensed in the last year a changing in how the Queen does carry out her central constitutional role as head of state. We saw a change in how the state opening Parliament happened, with the Queen not present, not reading her own speech, but her son, the Prince of Wales, doing that. We also, of course, Sarah Jane, saw a change this week with the handover of power. One outgoing Prime Minister tendering his resignation, the incoming Prime Minister Liz Truss being asked to form a government. They did not travel 1 mile from here, from Downing Street to Buckingham Palace. Instead, 500 miles they travelled to Balmoral, to that private, secluded castle, which has been a home for monarchs back to the time of Queen Victoria in the 1850s. Certainly, there was also a sign last night when the Privy Council meeting that the Queen was supposed to be leading and chairing was postponed. That would have been happening virtually using video conferencing software. The Privy Council being a group of senior government advisors, but that did not happen. Now, there's no big constitutional problem because that is a delay, but it was perhaps another sign. I think it's also important to reflect the very important role the Queen clearly has provided and continues to provide to prime ministers, providing wisdom and counsel, which is valuable partly because of her longevity, because she has spoken to known prime ministers through significant times of change, significant times of crisis, and many of those figures, if we talk of Winston Churchill or Anthony Eden or Harold Macmillan, many of those people who've long since left this earth are now figures in history books. people whose decisions historians, school children, university students debate over. It is a sign of her longevity that she's been providing that role for 7 decades, that she is in her 10th decade. I spoke to one cabinet minister in the last few minutes who said it's important to stress the government don't know anything. Buckingham Palace are in charge. They will remain in charge. And this cabinet minister certainly said that the government will know as soon as the rest of us do, as soon as any update comes from Buckingham Palace. If you talk to politicians who've met the Queen and have some sense of her, what they speak of is warmth, a familiar face, but also, Sarah Jane, I think it's important to stress, she remains a bit of an enigmatic figure. And the fact that she is now surrounded by her family in her private residence, where she has relaxed.
Yeah, I guess I would believe that.
Feeds into that picture of the Queen.
2:37. So that would have been 8:37 this morning. So yeah, I'm going with that.
We have some very important news. Buckingham Palace has just announced that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has died. She was 96 years old.
There you go.
Queen died just a few moments ago, the announcements at Balmoral. She was the longest reigning monarch in British history and the world's oldest head of state. Her eldest son and heir, Charles, the former Prince of Wales, is now the king. Now, if you're joining us, this was the news in the last few moments. Buckingham Palace has announced that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has died.
Damn,
Our royal
she's gone.
correspondent, Rhiannon Mills,
And it's weird.
joins me now. Rhiannon, your thoughts?
You know, obviously we don't know her personally,
So
right?
it's
But
just been confirmed via social media, their website, in which the royal family have said the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. They add the King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. This will clearly come as devastating news for the royal family and millions of people across the United Kingdom and around the world. Queen Elizabeth II was a much-loved and respected monarch and a truly unique figure on the world stage, a head of state without equal, admired not just here in the United Kingdom, but across the globe by members of the public, politicians, and religious leaders. Many of us will simply not remember a time when she wasn't our head of state, and she was a constant figure in every aspect of national life. From becoming queen when she was only 25, she then went on to become Britain's longest reigning monarch and displayed this unwavering commitment to her country and her Commonwealth throughout what was a truly record-breaking reign. Now, her dedication to that constitutional role was never questioned, but her family were just as important to her as a devoted wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. And their admiration for her was always so clearly seen when she was surrounded by her family, when we saw those moments of great national celebration and reflection. It's worth saying that for many, her reign will forever be defined by what was a selfless sense of duty. But it wasn't about her own personal power, privilege, or entitlement. This was a role that she felt that she was born to fulfill. Her quiet and restrained demeanour was always guiding her family and the United Kingdom through what was an extraordinary period of social and political change. But throughout all of that, she was always conscious of keeping the monarchy relevant. And while respecting as well and upholding important traditions, she often showed this adaptability that many will now credit with securing the future of the institution. It is worth saying that her old age really should not detract from the enormity of this news and the huge constitutional change that her death now brings. For nearly 70 years, she was this symbol of stability and continuity, and for so many, always a figure of national pride who really embodied those values of public service and duty well into her 90s, and as we saw this week, until the very end. Now, the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth realms will witness a period of reflection and constitutional change, which many of us will never have experienced in our lifetime, as we now mourn the death of Queen Elizabeth II and witness the succession of her son as the new king.
And Rhiannon, we last saw Her Majesty the Queen in public, of course, just 2 days ago, when she asked Liz Truss to form her government, to become her 15th Prime Minister.
It was remarkable. We saw, until the end, really, that determination to simply carry on with her constitutional duties. And no, she wasn't able to travel down to London to appoint her 15th Prime Minister, as she had done with all of her other prime ministers throughout her 70-year reign. But she wanted to make sure that she was seen by members of the public to be continuing on with those constitutional duties. And we saw that in practice there, the Queen reaching her hand out to appoint Liz Truss as her 15th Prime Minister. I think that is why this announcement of her death will be such a shock to so many. But over the last 12 months, there is no doubt that we have seen a gradual slowing down, a gradual change in the duties that she felt that she was able to carry out. I think it was important for her to be seen to carry out that handover of power between prime ministers, because we hadn't seen her in public for quite a long time. She'd obviously travelled up to Scotland, where she was enjoying her summer break. Previously, the last time that we saw her was when she visited a hospice, accompanied by Princess Anne, and that was in July. And we saw with her, she was there once again, carrying that stick, because we know over the last 12 months, she was having difficulty with her mobility. The palace often describing it as episodic mobility problems, which did mean that sometimes she wasn't able to attend certain engagements. But I think what was striking there is to see Princess Anne alongside her. And that has been a theme that we have witnessed right throughout the last 12 months, is the family being there to make sure that when she felt she was able to go out and meet the public, as she has done, as she did right throughout her 70-year reign, they could support her and they could be there in any way that they needed her. And of course, we had the Platinum Jubilee just months ago, the first British monarch to ever mark that remarkable milestone. And we were wondering around that weekend, how much we would be able to see her because of the difficulties that she'd been having. But I think you could see that she wanted to make that effort. She knew the crowds once again had come out to mark that milestone moment with her. But also that Platinum Jubilee was so central in the Queen showing her wishes for the future. There alongside her were those central key members of the royal family that she knew she was passing on those responsibilities to. The Prince of Wales, the Duchess of Cornwall, the Prince of Wales, it has to be said, now our new king, and to the other side of her, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and their 3 children. In those images, there was a very clear message from the Queen, a sense of future-proofing the monarchy, as she did right throughout those 7 decades, saying, this is my family, who I love very much, who I trust, who have shown already how committed they are to you, the public, how committed they are to the country and the Commonwealth, and you should trust them when it comes to me stepping back from my responsibilities. Today, of course, though, the family will be around her. They have all travelled to Balmoral to be alongside her as now we mark her death.
Okay, so it has not been announced formally or officially, as they would say, but Buckingham Palace did release a statement, so I take that as official.
The King and the Queen consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow.
So yes, it's official.
And Rhiannon Mills, our royal correspondent, is still with us. And of course, Rhiannon, this is the way things work in Britain, in the United Kingdom. With her death, we now have a king.
We do. We have a hereditary monarchy. And this, I think, is something that will potentially come as a shock to some across the country. As soon as Queen Elizabeth II took her last breath, we had a new king, and that is her son and heir, formerly the Prince of Wales, and now King Charles. We do wait to find out what name he takes. There is a potential that he may change his name to a different regnal name, but we await that announcement in the next hours, days to come. But in the coming days, we will see the pendulum swing in many ways between mourning the death of Queen Elizabeth II and the welcoming of a new king. We are going to see spectacular pageantry that many of us have never witnessed before. The Accession Council is where he will be made officially the new king, where he will be sworn in. That will gather at St. James's Palace. We wait to see exactly when that will take place, but that will formally mark his succession, and we will witness him taking his oath, and it is at that moment that he will be proclaimed as king. I think what is striking is that at a time when most people would have retired, he is now stepping into a role that he's spent his entire life preparing for. And we have had a very long time to get to know him as the Prince of Wales, and now we will adapt to him as our new king.
Rhiannon, thank you very much indeed. Let's look at the moment that the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II was formally announced. This is the short statement being brought to the gates of Buckingham Palace. Fixed to those gates And the statement, as you can read for yourself, saying that the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral and will travel shortly to London. That, in actual fact, as Her Majesty has passed in Scotland, Holyrood Palace. And these are the scenes at Buckingham Palace here in London. The crowds gathering. They've been gathering all afternoon since the initial statement from Buckingham Palace concerning the Queen's deteriorating health was announced, that doctors were concerned for her, but she was comfortable. During then the course of the afternoon, the senior members of the royal family gathered at Balmoral, the Queen's summer residence. She's been there. She has been every summer for the entirety of that period, where she received 2 prime ministers in a day just 2 days ago. Here, the crowds gathered, and the most significant change, of course, the flagpole above Buckingham Palace, where the Union flag has now been lowered to half-mast and will remain at half-mast during the period of mourning, as we remember the life, the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in this her Platinum Jubilee year. Rhiannon Mills, our royal correspondent, is with me, and as we take in these scenes and the enormity of what has happened and what is happening, Rhiannon, 70 years on the throne, as I mentioned, the Platinum Jubilee, the vast, vast majority of residents of this kingdom, of residents of the planet, have known no other Queen of Great Britain and Northern Ireland than Queen Elizabeth.
She truly was a unique figure, and the enormity of this moment, not just for this country, but also the world, should not be underestimated. Probably one of the most recognizable women around the world, and a woman who, without fuss, carried on those duties right until the very end. And in some ways, how better for her to bow out than in a week where we saw her carrying out her official duty. We don't know how difficult it was for her on Tuesday to be able to stand there and accept the resignation of one prime minister and then appoint another. But you can't forget that it was when she was just 21 years old that she made that lifelong commitment, saying no matter how long or short her life would be, she would always serve her country and Commonwealth. And that was also a pledge that she reinforced when we saw her mark Accession Day to start her Platinum Jubilee this year, where again she pledged that she would continue to carry out that official role. And yes, increasingly her family have stepped in to support her. But ultimately, there is no equal to Queen Elizabeth II. What is remarkable is when you look back and think that this was a young princess who was born in 1926 and wasn't expected to be queen. And then there was this twist of fate when her grandfather died and then her uncle abdicated, her father then became king. And then immediately she was his heir at the age of 10. And it was during, I think, those formative wartime years that really shaped that stoic sense of commitment and selflessness that we continue to see throughout her 70 years. Of course, there was also the twist of fate that her father would die so young in his 50s and she would become queen at just the age of 25. And you have to think back to 1952, at the time when it wasn't a woman's place to rule, it wasn't a woman's place to be in positions of power. She ultimately had to prove herself to the country, to the world, to courtiers, to politicians, that she was more than capable of the job in hand. And throughout that remarkable 7 decades, we would see how she would, yes, respect the traditions of this institution, but would make sure that the monarchy was seen to be adaptable, changing with the times, relatable. And I think you look back at the pictures of her coronation and you see just how young she was, such a beautiful, glamorous young queen, and literally the weight of the country on her as her young son watched on, now our new king. And she talked about what it was like, that moment where she became queen, and the fact that, speaking about her father's death, there's a documentary called Elizabeth R from 1990. And speaking about her father's death, she said, "In a way, I didn't have an apprenticeship. My father died much too young, and it was all very sudden, taking on and making the best job you can. It's a question of maturing into something one has got used to doing and accepting the fact that here you are and it's all fate." And throughout that remarkable reign, we saw that she was always committed, despite the world changing around her, despite witnessing the most extraordinary political, social, economic change. She would continue to try and make sure that that institution was reacting to what was happening around her.
Just on the here and now, we understand that an announcement, a statement will be made by the Prime Minister in Downing Street very shortly. And let's just reflect on what an extraordinary week it has been in the history of the entirety of the United Kingdom. The passing of our head of the state after 70 years on the throne, 2 days after a change of Prime Minister. We really are in a moment of constitutional upheaval and transition. And this is the statement also posted formally on the gates of Buckingham Palace, where in the past, of course, that device has been used for much happier news. You'll be more familiar with it, I suppose, to announce the birth of royal babies over the year. This the saddest of news being confirmed on the gates of Buckingham Palace, that the Queen, I'll read it to you again, the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. And we also caught a glimpse there, another somber symbol of the flag fluttering at half-mast, the Union flag flying at half-mast above Buckingham Palace here in central London. And as I say, not too very far away from Buckingham Palace, over in Downing Street, that lectern, which just 2 short days ago, or 2 long days ago, because the whole focus has changed, was used by a new Prime Minister to announce that she had just returned from Balmoral and had been asked by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II to form a government to become her 15th Prime Minister, is now in place for a much more somber occasion, for the reaction from that Prime Minister to the announcement of that death of the monarch. A monarch who, in actual fact, that is the last picture we have of her, of Queen Elizabeth asking Liz Truss to become, as I say, her 15th Prime Minister, just 2 short, 2 long days ago. Let's talk to our royal contributor, Alistair Bruce. Alistair, simply your thoughts.
The Queen's death marks the end of the Elizabethan era that we've all lived through. And I think what's been wonderful is that she started serving the nation at the age of 25. as Queen, and literally up to 2 days before the angels called her, she played her part as sovereign. And I think throughout it, she has smiled with us, she has been sad with us, but she's always led us. And as she went to her coronation with Prince Philip at her side, she dedicated her life to do precisely what she has now done. And I don't think any nation could ask for more. And I know that one of the last things she would have wanted to achieve was a tidy and sensible transition to the new king. And that will be happening privately. It will have been a private family time today at Balmoral. But almost immediately, the process of the constitution into which she stepped in 1952 will, in its own way this year, move forward to take the crown that she carried from her father onto her son. And I think that it is the example she's always given, not only as Queen, but also as head of the Commonwealth, in massively changing times, that he will always have as a guide. But you're right, Dermot, we wait, of course, for the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom to, at this moment of transition, give guidance to the nation in that point of political leadership that she holds, so that the king, who takes on the constitutional position of sovereign, can pass into this new position he holds, so brilliantly passed to him with the death of the Queen.
And it's hard to adjust to, Alistair, isn't it? The king, because that's what happens. There is no interregnum. The transition is instantaneous. We now have King Charles, if he decides to stick with that name, King Charles III.
When Churchill spoke to the nation soon after the Queen acceded to the throne at the early death of her father, he said that he, like many of his generation, would once again be able to sing God Save the Queen. And of course, he remembered the time of Queen Victoria. But undoubtedly now, with the return of a king, there are many in our sort of parents' and grandparents' ages who may well still be alive to sing God Save the King again, as they did in 1952. And it is, Dermot, a continuity. It is a tapestry of time. And the crown weaves its way in and out of the strands that we throw before it. And that is the way in which history is held together by a kingdom's monarch. And it is part of the continuity that the political processes must come and go, the arguments must take place, Parliament must exist and show the anguish and hopes and disappointments of the nation, but that the crown which the Queen wore is one that completes continuity and is passed to the new king. And that has now happened.
So, Alistair, what happens now in terms of lying in state?
Well, the Queen is at peace at Balmoral. She's surrounded by her family, and any of us who've lost a parent will know how poignant a time that is. And of course, for the new king, there can only be a short period of contemplation, because immediately he must return to London and there will be the Accession Council. The Accession Council is a tradition that is broadly English, but has encompassed the whole of the United Kingdom. It comes from the old Saxon Witanagemote, which was when, after a monarch died in Norman times and Saxon times, all the great people of the nation would come together and they would choose who would be the successor. We have, of course, through primary legislation, a clear knowledge that the heir apparent and now king is Prince Charles, the Prince of Wales, who has now acceded to the throne. So at the Accession Council, this will be formalized. But before anything can happen, the new monarch will be asked if he will acknowledge and respect the independence of the Church of Scotland. And assuming he says that he will, he then becomes formally king. And then we will have an announcement in Friary Court at St. James's Palace, given by the Garter King of Arms, which will be repeated in different parts of the United Kingdom, proclaiming the new king, with the words that will go along the lines of, following the death of our late sovereign of blessed and happy memory, the crown is now come to the high and mighty prince. And we will then, in due course, find out by which name the new king wishes to.
You're watching Sky News live from Buckingham Palace. It is 7 o'clock, and half an hour ago, Buckingham Palace announced that the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The statement continued that the King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow. A very brief statement saying very clearly what we feared, certainly throughout the day after an announcement was made about the Queen's deterioration in her health, and that her doctors were deeply concerned about her conditions. And this is the formality of the process, a process so familiar to so many of us when it comes to the births and marriages that take place within the royal family. Well, this also the process by which a royal death is formally announced. Posted outside the royal palace is that statement that the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral. It was announced at about 6:30 this evening that the King and the Queen Consort, that's King Charles III now, and the Queen Consort Camilla, will remain at Balmoral this evening. They travelled up there during the course of the afternoon to be with Her Majesty the Queen, to be with Charles's mother, and they will remain there this evening, returning to London tomorrow. And that's the symbol that we will become familiar with over the next few days and weeks. The flag, the Union flag, flying at half-mast above Buckingham Palace here in central London. Let's talk to our royal correspondent, Rhiannon Mills. And Rhiannon, the news we all feared during the course of the day, since we got that statement at about 12:30 about the Queen's condition, and then 6 hours later, that sad news.
And I think it will come as an enormous shock to people right across this country and across the Commonwealth, because it was only on Tuesday that we saw her carrying out one of her key constitutional roles, welcoming her 15th Prime Minister. And yet now we are mourning the death of Queen Elizabeth II. I think she was so determined to carry out those public duties right until the very end. And we've seen that over the last 12 months. Yes, things had to be adjusted and changed, and plans had to be changed to accommodate the fact that she was having mobility issues. But when she could, she knew and she felt that she must be seen by members of the public. And in essence, I think it was a role that she deeply enjoyed. She loved meeting people. She was always able to have this remarkable ability to put people at ease. But I think, as you said, it was from around lunchtime that concerns certainly started to build, because it was highly unusual for the palace to decide to share information about the Queen's medical condition. Around 12:30, they told us that the Queen's doctors were concerned for her health and had recommended that she remain under medical supervision. And at the time, we were thinking, well, was it because Tuesday was too much? She was too busy. But clearly, for whatever reason, there was a swift decline over the last 48 hours. as she remained in a place that she loved, Balmoral, her summer retreat, where year after year she was always surrounded by her family. And that was precisely the case this afternoon. The palace, on announcing that the medical household were concerned about her, also, again, made the unusual step of announcing that her family were heading there, including the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. The Prince of Wales, who is now our king. We have just had a statement through from His Majesty the King at the time of the Queen's death, and I can read that to you now. In it, he says, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms, and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world. During this period of mourning and change, my family and I will be comforted and sustained by our knowledge of the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held." So there is the first statement that we've had from the new king, maybe King Charles. It is his decision whether or not he chooses a new regnal name, but they're paying a very heartfelt tribute to, as he describes, my beloved mother, but explaining how the family will take great comfort in the knowledge of how the country, the Commonwealth, felt about her, the respect and deep affection in which the Queen was so widely held.
Rhiannon, many thanks. Rhiannon Mills, our royal correspondent there. Let's just to alert you to what we're expecting to see in Downing Street in a short time. The lectern where announcements are made has been erected just outside number 10, where the new Prime Minister, just a couple of days into the job, Liz Truss, is expected to make a statement to the nation about the passing of Her Majesty the Queen, Queen Elizabeth II. That statement, very short, that the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon, and we know that she was surrounded by the closest members of her family. All four of her children travelled up to Balmoral, or were in Scotland, to be at her side in her last few hours. We understand, and you heard there from the statement read out by Rhiannon, that the King and the Queen Consort, deeply saddened, will remain at Balmoral this evening. Charles with his mother, and will return to London tomorrow. It, of course, comes just 2 days since that lectern was used by Liz Truss to address the nation on becoming the new Prime Minister. Let's listen to the Prime Minister.
We are all devastated by the news that we have just heard from Balmoral. The death of Her Majesty the Queen is a huge shock to the nation and to the world. Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her. She ascended the throne just after the Second World War. She championed the development of the Commonwealth from a small group of 7 countries to a family of 56 nations, spanning every continent of the world. We are now a modern, thriving, dynamic nation. Through thick and thin, Queen Elizabeth II provided us with the stability and the strength that we needed. She was the very spirit of Great Britain, and that spirit will endure. She has been our longest ever reigning monarch. It's an extraordinary achievement to have presided with such dignity and grace for 70 years. Her life of service stretched beyond most of our living memories. In return, she was loved and admired by the people in the United Kingdom and all around the world. She has been a personal inspiration to me and to many Britons. Her devotion to duty is an example to us all. Earlier this week, at 96, she remained determined to carry out her duties as she appointed me as her 15th Prime Minister. Throughout her life, she's visited more than 100 countries, and she has touched the lives of millions around the world. In the difficult days ahead, we will come together with our friends across the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and the world to celebrate her extraordinary lifetime of service. It is a day of great loss, but Queen Elizabeth II leaves a great legacy. Today, the crown passes, as it has done for more than 1,000 years, to our new monarch, our new head of state, His Majesty, King Charles III. With the King's family, we mourn the loss of his mother, and as we mourn, we must come together as a people to support him, to help him bear the awesome responsibility that he now carries for us all. We offer him our loyalty and devotion, just as his mother devoted so much to so many for so long. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
Prime Minister Liz Truss there, ending her statement, saying, "God save the King." Liz Truss there reflecting that it was just 2 days ago that she had been to Balmoral to be received by Her Majesty and asked to form a government, asked to become her 15th Prime Minister. That's the last image we have of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, whose death was announced today. Liz Truss also spoke for the nation when she talked of the devastation, the shock that we all feel. She said that Queen Elizabeth, who spanned 70 years on the throne, was the monarch that the vast majority of citizens of the United Kingdom ever knew. The rock, Liz Truss said, on which modern Britain was built. The Prime Minister described Queen Elizabeth as the very spirit of Great Britain and said that spirit will endure. And she also reflected on, as we all will be over the next few weeks, months, and many, many years to come, on Her Majesty's devotion to duty. To the end, her life was devoted to service, to carrying out her duties as the monarch, the longest serving monarch in the history of Great Britain and the United Kingdom. This, her platinum year. Well, I believe now I can bring you the statement from the King, His Majesty the King. Charles has said at the time of the Queen's death, he said, "The death of my